Welcome everybody to Tuesday Night. I'm your host MC Toon, and that was the old metal intro that I keep around in the stack there because sometimes it's not about flatties, and tonight it's not about flatties. I've got in the house Dapper Dinosaur. Look how dapper he is.
Yes. Here, my Klingon t-shirt and my Klingon set. It's very nice.
I love the set. So Dapper Dinosaur has his own channel. It's linked in the description. There's two of them, two channels I found.
Well, one of those is actually not me.
That's not you?
The coding one is not. That's actually someone who coincidentally has a very similar name.
Doesn't it have the same avatar?
No, he's a green T-Rex, and I'm a brownish Ceratosaurus.
All right, well, I'll remove it then. Anyway.
Totally different genera. Although, from what I understand, he's got a good channel too. So if you want coding tutorials, I mean...
There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, apologies for that. Anyway, we will be discussing some things that he is bringing. It is not directly related to Flat Earth, though it is related to science, which is what we're all here and we all love.
Yeah. Well, so what I'm bringing is I've got parts of a talk from Scott Gillis. This was a talk that was given in a church. And so there's a lot of stuff that I felt like I didn't really need to comment on. Like he's got some stuff where it's like, here's how I interpret 2 Peter 2:13 or something. Like, that's fine. You can interpret that however. I don't really care. I only care about the scientific claims because, while my channel does focus on young earth creationism, which is a primarily Christian phenomenon, I'm not here to convert you away from Christianity or to bash Christianity broadly. I don't care to do any of that. I just want to fix people who are saying verifiably incorrect things about history or science, which includes, I have a number of videos saying hey, atheists, stop saying this dumb thing about the history of Christianity because you're wrong about it.
Hey, we all get stuff wrong, don't we?
Yeah, hey, if you think the First Council of Nicaea decided which books were in the Bible, you're wrong about that. That's not what happened, so please stop saying it. So, yeah, but this guy is from Creation Ministries International, which I do want to go a little bit into a tiny little bit of history with them because it's amusing. They actually started out as Answers in Genesis, and the organization that we now know of as Answers in Genesis was just Answers in Genesis America, and there was a falling out over the degree to which Ken Ham should be the face of Answers in Genesis America. And eventually, a secretary of one of the head guys at these organizations was accused of being a witch who was a necrophiliac and possessed by a demon. And as a result of all of this bad blood, the two organizations, despite having a lot in common in a lot of ways, don't actually hang out with each other, and they don't really talk to each other. And while sometimes their employees meet up at conferences, they don't generally get along very well. And the other amusing thing with CMI specifically is that in 2020, they were big boosters of hey, go get yourself vaccinated. This is a serious thing. And then a whole huge swath of their audience, a large majority of their audience, were saying, we can't believe you're shills for big pharma and how could you have betrayed us? And they're like, look, this is good science. And it's gee, CMI, who is it that might have trained your entire audience to be anti-science nut jobs? Don't know. That's a mystery.
I didn't know that. Out. Interesting that they came out for... Did they then switch later, or did they just kind of go silent on it after they got the kickback? To their credit,
they stuck with their guns and said, yes, go get yourself a vaccine for the COVID. And I mean, they took a lot of flack. And on the one hand, props to them for doing the right thing. But also, it was just hilarious to watch them flounder around and wonder why they had such a anti-science audience. Gee, I don't know. It's kind of like when Jaren's why are so many of my audience angry at me for telling the truth? It's well, you train them to not believe people who tell the truth, Jaren. And look, I know Jaren has come a long way, but this is the bed you made.
Yeah. So, and hey, Jaren's owning it.
Oh yeah, I mean,
to his credit,
him, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So
I think he's the now former flat earther, but he's of the flat earthers who went. He's the one who has come out with the best outcome, I think, by far.
Oh yeah,
is Jared. So All right, but this guy is going to be giving us a broad swath of young Earth creationist talking points, and I'm going to try to go through as many of them as I can. I pared down what was originally about an hour-long talk to about 22 minutes. I don't know if we're going to get through all of it.
Okay.
But we'll see what happens. And yeah, if you come over to my channel, this is basically what we do 3 times a week. I have 2 live shows and a scripted video that comes out every week. So, and that has been without fail, except for 1 week where I had a false, guideline strike that got overturned on a second appeal, which I had to harass YouTube about on Twitter. So other than that one hiccup, I think it's been like 3 years of consistent 2 lives, 1 scripted video per week.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. And if you are someone who has early access to my videos, I'm currently, I think, 7 months ahead on scripted videos. So if you want to give me a buck, you can watch like they're hours and hours.
They're already uploaded and scheduled?
Mm-hmm. They're not all scheduled. So they're currently unlisted, but if you have early access, you can see either my member only posts or you can go to my Patreon posts and just get access to any of them.
That's crazy. I'm like 7 years behind in scripted videos. Seriously. Well, I'm working on right now a video that I told Culture Cats, he was Conspiracy Cats at the time. Mm-hmm. 7 years ago, I'm like, hey, this will be my next video. I'm working on it right now.
Hey, better late than never. So I will go ahead and I will share this this video.
All right.
So let me know if that is all set.
Yes, looks good.
All right. So yeah, this is Scott Gills. He is a CMI speaker. If you want to look him up, he's on creation.com. That's the CMI website. He's got a BA in religious studies from Oregon University. And as far as I know, that's his only formal education. But then again, it doesn't matter. I'm not someone who's like, oh, you either can or can't talk about science and stuff based on your degrees. Like my degree is a bachelor's in history. It's not, creationism by a long shot. So,
okay.
All right. So we'll just dive in.
How many of you, and when you've been out maybe sharing your faith, have had people challenge you with questions like this? I mean, did God really create in 6 days? I mean, after all, science has proven that evolution and its millions of years are a fact.
All right, so I left this bit in because normally it's not something I comment on a lot, but it just seems weird to me because whenever I've had someone approach me about a religious topic, these are almost never the things I think of, right? Like, I want to know about, like, what is your theology about, like, what is your theological anthropology like? What kinds of rituals do you do? What ethics are you drawing from your religious experience? And also, it's also weird because most Christians belong to groups that do not hold to a young earth creationist position as being a required part of their like religious identity, right? Like you don't have to be a young earth creationist to be a Catholic. You don't have to be a young earth creationist to be any of the Eastern churches that I'm aware of. So that's like Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, Nestorian Church, Church of the East.
Even the real, like the ones where it's a big deal, they don't say that it's part of their doctrine, like that it's necessary. Typically, it's.
I'm a former young earth creationist, so it's actually less common than it's more common than being a former flerf, but we are out there. They are reachable. Some of them I was, and I stopped being a young earth creationist and kept going to the young earth creationist church I had attended previously for years.
Yeah,
and there were awkward conversations, but I wasn't kicked out. I wasn't called not a Christian. It was weird. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't the most comfortable experience, but yeah, I wasn't ostracized. Now, there might be churches where that's the case, and if that is the case and you're in that position, that sucks. Feel free to reach out to me if you're in that situation, because I've helped people in that situation before. We can figure out a way to either get you a new church or get you Christian-based resources about not being a young earth creationist and stuff.
Is it Reasons to Believe, I think?
So Reasons to Believe is an old earth anti-evolution group. I would recommend generally Biologos because they are a just overall pro-science and also Christian group They accept all the science in biology, geology, astronomy, all that. And so that's where I would normally direct people, especially Protestants. If you're Catholic, you probably don't have to worry about this. And if you're Orthodox, you also probably don't have to worry about this. So, all right, here we go.
Sub Rosa wonders, who wants to bet he attends Trek conventions in a Kirk costume?
I do have a Kirk costume off that way. If you watch, so the actual second channel I do have is Top Hats Off, and it's where I did my Star Trek tabletop RPG with a bunch of people, including Craig McBeal. And in that, I was in the yellow uniform with the captain stripes and everything. So if you want to see me in a Captain Kirk uniform, literally just go to that channel and click on any of the Star Trek Lexington videos.
That's the one I'll put in the description.
There you go.
Top hats off.
I also just love all of these talks that they give at churches are full of advertisements for their products. They're almost like 30% ad, and I cut out a lot of the ad stuff too. If you want to go to creation.com and buy their books, feel free. I'm not going to use Toon's platform as advertising for Creation Ministries International.
And by the way, what about dinosaurs? How did all the animals fit on the ark?
That part is weird to me because I just don't care, right? It's sort of like if flat Earth were true, our meteorological models would break.
Yeah.
But of all the problems I have with flat Earth, how does it rain is so far down on the list that I just don't care, right? Like how do you predict where the sun is? It's such a big thing that like, well, could you predict if it's going to rain here today? Like that's so far down on the list. I just don't care. And it's like that with the ark. Like how do you fit the animals on the ark? The ark is impossible for almost infinite ways.
Yeah, fitting them on isn't the big problem.
Yeah. In fact, you know what? It's a magical ark. It's a TARDIS. It's bigger on the inside. I'm willing to just say that that's fine. Just okay.
How about how did the koala bears, who don't move fast, get from the ark to Australia and leave no trace?
And what did they eat? Because koala bears only eat living eucalyptus leaves that are attached to eucalyptus branches. Because if you present fresh eucalyptus leaves in like a bowl to koalas, it won't compute. They're too dumb. They can't figure out that that's the same thing they eat from the trees.
They're too dumb. Matters Now has rated. Welcome everybody from Matters Now. Glad to have you.
All right.
What about the ape men? Carbon dating? Where did the races come from, and why does a loving God allow death and suffering? Now,
okay, I want to know if anyone has ever been asked where the races come from when talking about religion broadly. Ever. I've never heard this question.
Is it something that because of his position in the organization, he hears it more? Maybe it's some sort of a bias because of his...
I think, yeah. So one of the things, creationism is a profoundly inward-facing endeavor. They like to pretend that they're talking about like how to convert people to Christianity. But if you actually pay attention, their target audience is Christians who already accept young earth creationism.
Yeah.
They just want to keep them doing it. They don't like it's pretty much unheard of for someone to just become a young earth creationist because like they got a degree in biology and found out that evolution is nonsense. Like that doesn't generally happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're not going to convert someone to Christianity by saying like, hey, did you know that dinosaurs actually went extinct 4,400 years ago in a global flood? Yeah, well, Jesus is looking pretty good now, huh? Like that's just not how it's ever going to work.
I've never heard a conversion story based on that. Not that there might not be, but I don't think that's that's not.
There's a lot of people out there. I'm sure someone has been super convinced by, you know, a Noah story explanation. Yeah. Someone out there, sure. But that's generally not how it works.
Will you do me a favor? If you've had people ask or challenge you with questions like that, would you put your hand in the air, leave it up there, and look around the room?
My hand is not up.
That's actually what we're about. We develop resources that you can use to answer those and many more questions. Is there a God? Does he love me? And how about this last question? Is the Bible true?
So that has two things. One is, I am perfectly happy for anyone to believe that there's a God who loves them or that there's a God who doesn't. I don't know. Maybe you believe in a God who's a jerk. You're allowed to do that too. But the weird part is the Bible true is a question that is a weird question to me because like it's not one book, and it can't be said to be true or false. Like, if you turn to Proverbs, is Proverbs true or false? Well, I don't know. It's just a bunch of aphorisms. That's like advice. It's not true or false. It doesn't even make sense. Like,
yeah, maybe that's not what he means, but I
but even in the cases where it's like, are the Gospels true? Well, not literally everything in the Gospels is literally true, because some of it doesn't quite connect with each other. And if that's a problem for you, then you can work that out. But like, it doesn't really matter, I don't think. If like how many times did Jesus feed people with loaves and fish? There's more than one answer you can get from studying the Bible. Does that make it false or true? No.
Yeah.
I just don't. It's a weird question to me. Maybe it's not to other people.
But pi is not 3.
Our culture.
Yeah, pi isn't 3. You know, there wasn't a flood that covered the whole earth. There just wasn't.
That question has been answered with a resounding no.
So here he's asking, like, in society, has society answered that the Bible is untrue with a no? And the answer is no, it hasn't. Christianity is very intellectually and culturally dominant in at least the United States. And as a result, no, society has not answered that the Bible is false. And this is just one of those. Creationists have a mindset that's a lot like a lot of flat earthers have, where they're like, they are out to get us. Satan is trying to trick us with dinosaur bones and radiometric dating, and it's all over the place in young earth creation. Now, Creation Ministries International is not the worst at this. They're not great at it either, but it's a very similar mindset where the big old they, secularists, evolutionists, the atheists, they're out to get us because they disagree with us on science. And no, they're not. In fact, generally speaking, especially evangelical Christians have an outsized influence on culture compared to how big a portion of the population they are.
It is a big portion of the United States, and
oh yeah,
I don't know. Well, I think in England they must have something, because you know I think when 50, 100 years ago in England it was maybe a bit like that. The church had a huge influence on society because the government and church were very much overlapping in a lot of ways.
I mean, it's still the case that there are bishops of the Church of England in the House of Lords, but like, as far as an actual cultural influence, the church has significantly waned.
Yeah.
And there are British young earth creationists, but they tend not to be Church of England. They tend to be various evangelical Protestant groups instead of Church of England. Church of England does not have a whole lot of time for creationists. They don't. To be fair, they don't have a whole lot of time for anything because they can barely staff their parsonages. So you know, well, sorry, Church of England, but like, you're just kind of losing population.
There's neighbors of ours that go to an Anglican church, which is basically the American offshoot of the COE.
Yeah, the Episcopal Church is the United States branch of the Worldwide Anglican Communion. So they share their doctrines and most of their liturgy with the Church of England, as well as other Anglican churches around. Like, obviously there's an Anglican church in Canada. There's a lot of Anglican churches in Africa. That's a really big sector in terms of just overall Anglican population.
Oh yeah.
And they also are generally not young earth creationists. In fact, one of my regular co-hosts that is on with me on the third Tuesday of each month is an Anglican.
Okay.
Yeah. In fact, of my regular co-hosts, I have like 4. Only one of them is an atheist. My channel is definitely not an atheist channel. If you're looking for atheist content, you should go elsewhere.
Most people in our culture have been told over and over again that science has proven evolution and its accompanying millions.
Hey, June, just checking. Does science ever prove anything?
No.
Okay.
So, I mean, he's off to a bad start here if he's talking like that. Well, maybe he's just parroting. Maybe he's just trying to like mockingly parrot fluff science journalism. I don't know.
You will find there are a lot of connections between the rhetoric of flat earthers and young earthers. That's why I collectively like to call them all wrong earthers, because they're all fundamentally wrong about some very important aspect of the earth. And I've actually said that young earth is about as plausible and as reasonable as flat earth, but the difference is what it takes to disprove the young earth is a lot more involved personally than disproving the flat Earth, right? All I have to do to disprove the flat Earth is notice that the sun sets and then call someone in a different time zone and say, hey, is the sun up there?
Yeah.
Okay, well, flat Earth is gone now.
Yeah, because the Earth is here with us present at the moment.
Right.
But the past is not. We have to
So it's a lot
examine
harder.
it. Yeah, we have to examine it differently.
But the evidence is no less conclusive. Like there's as much debate in the scientific literature about the age of the Earth and whether or not evolution happens as there is in cartography circles about the shape of the Earth.
Yeah.
Like
It doesn't. Yeah, it's not a thing.
yeah.
Millions of years, and I believe it's like a tsunami that are pulling people away from that solid rock that we're commanded to stay on, God's inerrant and holy word. But I'd like to start out with a question, kind of a challenge for all of us this morning, and that is, are you willing to equip and train yourself with the answers to the tough questions people are asking so that you can be the one that dives in and rescues the perishing while perhaps others just stand by and watch?
Now that sounds nice, but I want to alert you guys to something. Creationists have created their own version of Google that only gives you results from creationist sources when you type in queries, and they are encouraging people to do things like use that. Now, it was developed in large part by Eric Hovind from Creation Today. But when a creationist says, I'm going to equip you, what they mean is I'm going to give you literature from inside the echo chamber so that you don't have to look outside of it for actual answers.
Interesting. What's it called?
Oh, the creationists who I don't remember.
So I met Eric in person.
Really? How long ago was that?
A couple years ago. We were in Pensacola Beach.
That makes sense. That's where he lives.
And it was a rainy day, like a little drizzly, so we couldn't do anything outside. I'm like, hey, do you want to drive by Dino Land? Defunct Dino Land? And my wife, being amazing, she's like, all right. So
See, I would be enthusiastic.
I know. I'm like, I'm not. It's not really my. Like, this isn't really the thing I do a lot, but I understand that you would.
Oh, yeah.
And so, because I looked it up on Google Street View, and I'm like, well, it looks like the gates are just sometimes open. Maybe we can just go wander around. So we went there. The gates were shut. We walked over to where, found out later, is the offices. Nobody answered. Walked a little farther, and then it's a house.
Yeah.
So the offices are connected to the house, and they didn't. I wasn't even there. My wife and kids went over and didn't even knock on the door or anything. But then they were walking away. And then Eric's mom sticks her head out the door. She's like, hey,
Joe.
She's like, what can I help you? We're like, oh, we're just looking. She's like, oh, yeah, come on in.
Nice.
She was super pleasant. She was in the middle of a piano lesson.
Okay.
And she walked us through the house to the offices. And then we met with, there were two people working there. And then they're like, no, Eric isn't here right now, but he might be home, might be here soon. And like a couple minutes later, there he drives up. And so he gave us a tour.
Nice.
A whole tour. We went into a studio and like very nice. It was a really nice interaction. Like I don't have any beef with him or anything. So
I mean, I give Eric Hovind big props for one big thing, right? So you probably know his father, Kent, is also fairly famous in young Earth creationist circles.
Uh-huh.
And Kent went to prison for a bit over 9 years for various tax crimes, and was also arraigned on mail fraud charges and some other charges. Eric has cut Kent out of his life because, by all accounts, including Kent's own, Kent is a very abusive man.
Yeah.
And he admits to physically abusing some of his kids. In fact, he proudly admits to it. He has at least a body count of 1 or 2 if you count the snake he killed. I mean, there's a 7-year-old and a less than 1-year-old snake. So I count 1, but I can see why you might want to count the juvenile rattlesnake that he killed. To be fair, it did bite him, but I think the snake was in the right in that circumstance. But Kent he has just lost wife number 4. He only legally married one of them, but
lost number 4.
who, according to reports from inside the new Dinosaur Adventureland that Kent runs, took with her some $16,000 or so from the ministry, as well as a large section of their store inventory from their gift shop.
Okay.
Hauled it away. So his first wife, the one you met, Jo Hovind, she divorced him. His next wife, Mary Toko, left him after she realized that he was not keeping books properly and would probably, if that was investigated, go back to prison for things. And she no longer wanted her finances entangled with his, lest she also end up in prison like his first wife did. And then his third wife left after he beat her.
I think I heard.
He's been convicted of that.
I heard the audio recording of that. Is that the one that was fish?
Yeah, that's. Okay. I don't even like thinking about that audio. I've talked to Cindy. I know Cindy. Cindy is a wonderful person, and hearing her go through that is something I don't ever need to experience ever again.
So I didn't know that. So my last knowledge was number 3 was it. Now there's a 4. Wow.
4 has come and gone, including taking his new stepdaughter that he was so proud to be a parent of again. Yeah. So
I need to admit there are people having a revolt in the chat here, because I have a book that belongs to King Crew. Yeah, it's the book on gravity. It's been to Antarctica.
That's impressive.
I read it live in Antarctica, so I think that the book is now worth a lot more than it used to be. So when I give it to him, he's going to owe me for that, right? Big time. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I will be in Cape Canaveral in May, and so I don't know if he can be there, but the 12th through the 16th, right in there that week of May, I'll be at Cape Canaveral. So if you can make it up there, I will be speaking. I have the day. I'll be speaking at Hack Space Con on May 15.
Nice. So I'm going to hit play and we'll see what else Scott has for us.
All right.
Did you know there's scientific statements actually in the Bible?
No.
See,
no,
I disagree.
We didn't get very far.
There are statements that you can opt to take as scientific statements if you choose. You can also opt not to do that.
Oh my gosh.
You know, for example, in the very first chapter of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, there's a phrase that's repeated 10 times. It says that God created plants and animals to reproduce after their what? Kind.
Oh, jeez.
Now that basically means dogs give birth to dogs and pigs give birth to pigs and corn kernels bring us corn plants.
Okay, so this is a trope in anti-evolution circles, including old Earth and young Earth creationism. And there's this idea that God created these archetypal kinds that you can't get out of or switch from one to another or anything. But the problem is that they're never defined in a way that lets us unambiguously determine where the boundaries of kinds would be, or what it would look like if one creature gave rise to a species that was of a different kind. So the only way they're ever defined is like looking back in time and assuming something about the past, which is to say kinds are the groups of organisms that actually have real ancestral connections between them, right? So if a creationist says, I think canids are a kind. Okay, so that means that dire wolves from, the Pleistocene, as well as modern jackals and dholes and gray wolves and foxes and maned wolves and all that, crab-eating foxes who are adorable, short-eared dogs from South America who are also adorable. Go look up South American canids. They're great. They're underappreciated. That's just advice. All of these share common ancestors. So when God created, he created an archetypal group, pair, we don't know exactly, of canids. And they later diversified into all these things. Okay. But since we don't have a way to verify for certain that, say, canids are in the same kind as, say, other close related groups, maybe from the fossil record, like borophagians or amphicyonids, both of which look a lot like dogs, but aren't quite in the same group as modern dogs, the question then becomes, are those the same kind? And there's no answer. And further, all evolution says, if that's your definition of kind, is just a group of organisms that share common ancestry and don't share it with anything else, is to say, well, then there's only one kind. And we don't have to worry about things going from one kind to another because evolution doesn't say they do anything.
Yeah.
So unless you can define it, we just say, well, we don't care.
If it were scientific, then it would be, well defined. It's not well defined.
Testable.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Like I don't know, is a lion a kind?
So usually what creationists do is they say that the family level is the kind.
Okay.
Which sounds nice, right? Because then you can just look at a list of like animal taxa, and if it ends in IDAE, IDA, then you can just say, well, that's a family because that's the ending for families.
Okay.
But the problem with that is what counts as a family is arbitrary, right? Because a family is just a group of similar genera.
It's just a layer, yeah. I mean,
Right.
so what about the liger? Because the liger, it's pretty much my favorite animal. It's like a lion and a tiger mixed. It's bred for its skills in magic.
So I have heard that. So I've actually seen a liger in real life. It was
me too.
Very large.
Me too.
Very big cat.
They're stinking big.
Yeah. So what they normally say is that because they think the kind is at the family, they would say that house cats, lions, snow leopards, wild cats, bobcats, lynxes, that those are servals, those are all in one kind.
But they can't all breed.
That's true. And the way that they say that is that if something can breed with something else, then those two things are in the same kind. If they can produce viable offspring that don't have to be fertile, they just have to be viable.
Okay. So a mule.
A mule means that
Right.
horses and donkeys are in the same kind. And because you can also get zebra hybrids with both donkeys and horses, they're in the same kind too.
Yeah, okay.
But they also say that just because two things can't breed, that doesn't mean that they aren't in the same kind, which makes this idea largely unfalsifiable. Because you can get yes answers, but you can never get a definitive no answer, which is the problem with science, right? For science, we need to be able to say, how are you wrong? If you're wrong, how do we know? And with kind, we can't. So it's a worthless concept in science because unless you can say, no, these two are definitely not in the same kind, and here's how I know, here's the evidence, then it's a pointless idea. And what actual science says is that all of these things are connected ancestrally. You do share a common ancestor with chimpanzees and mice and horses and dolphins and lizards and pine trees.
Yeah, at that scale.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay.
And when you think about it, it's basically saying that those original kinds had their DNA, their genome that was built in by.
Oh, I also want to point out that they're taking this word kind. In Hebrew, it's mean, which is mem, yud, nun, in case you're a Hebraist out there. And it's just a regular Hebrew word that means the same thing as like kind in English, right? It's just a grouping of some kind of indefined categories, right? Like you might say, hey, what kind of food you're eating today? And I might just say, I'm eating vegetarian today. Or I might be very specific and say, like, I'm eating a vegetarian pad thai made with this specific oil. Which one of those is the kind level? Done. There isn't one because it's one of those squishy words. It's just there. We're like, it's a kind. Don't worry about it. And instead, they're like, this is actually a scientific label from the Bible.
So what is the word kind? Can you say it in Klingon for the audience?
So the word that ends up usually being used like kind is doch, which is usually translated as thing, but like, meh. Yeah. If you use doch where you would mean kind, it's going to come across correctly.
All right.
Wait, was that the reveal for the people who don't watch me that I know some Klingon?
No, there's some people in the chat that are talking about your linguistic skills in Klingon.
Hey, I actually did modify this set here from when I downloaded it so that at least some of it actually says things. Like
oh wait,
the label right here.
Let me get it up on screen bigger. You'll have to stop sharing for people to see it.
Oh, I'll stop sharing real quick. Oops, I hit the wrong button. There's the stop share button.
There you go. So which one?
So this word here, it says GIF, which means like display screen or computer screen or monitor.
Okay.
It's also the first person singular personal pronoun, so I or me, but like whatever. And then over here, the top amber letters say Federation ship.
Wow.
The rest of it is just a whole bunch of nonsense that I didn't bother to change.
There you go, people.
It's two things. Actually, I had to reread it because I was looking at my screen before I joined the call, and I was like, did I actually make any of this mean anything? So I'm looking around. I'm like, okay, only two things. Got it. Because I don't use this set all that often, so I forgot. All right, here we go.
You'll have to reshare. You have to reshare your screen.
Oh my goodness, I'm an idiot.
Yeah, we didn't hear any of that either. So.
Yep, I'm an idiot. So
say that in Klingon.
This is just going to become like say it in Klingon hour, isn't it?
Yes, people want to know because you're a linguist.
I'm not. Okay, I am not a linguist. I am a well-read linguistics enthusiast. That's what it is. You guys are going to kill me.
Part of his creation, they pass on those genetic traits to future generations. And although
almost exactly 10 seconds.
do have the ability to adapt to their environment, nonetheless, the Bible is very clear that God created plants and animals.
So I want to point something out. Do you know what it's called when an organism enters a new environment and then they adapt to that through environmental pressures, determining which genes end up getting passed on to the future generations, and then the future generations have a slightly altered set of genetic traits?
I'll say it in English, you say it in Klingon. Evolution?
I actually don't know the word for evolution in Klingon. I'll look it up. I have a dictionary handy. I know I've looked it up before. It's just, when do I use that in Klingon? It's almost never.
Almost never.
Almost never. Yeah,
he didn't say never, people. He said almost never. He has used it, that means.
I have absolutely used it. I know I have. Because it's been in a few of my my thumbnails. Hovjetvoch is evolution.
There we go.
There you go. Yeah, sorry. I don't know all the words in Klingon. To be fair, I don't know all the words in English either. Although there's a lot more words in English than there are in Klingon.
But you're not a linguist, so it's okay.
Correct. Yeah. That's what it takes to be a linguist. Is you have to know all the words in all the languages. They give you a test when you go to linguistics school.
All of the words.
All the words.
Yeah. Not when you go. It's when you exit. When you.
Yeah. On the way out, you're like, oh, I got my diploma. They're like, hold up.
Just a second there, Bucko.
All the words, buddy. Write them all out.
Back it up.
That's shortly after the snake fight that you get for your PhD.
You have to have a snake fight. Oh, yeah, that's so cool.
It's a long-standing tradition in academia that you have to fight a snake to get your doctorate.
Okay.
At the very end, after your defense, and how dangerous a snake it is, that's how you can tell like how much the committee liked your work.
Oh,
because if they were like, "Oh, that's great," then they'll be like, "Oh, you can fight this milk snake."
So we've got
"Oh, that sucks."
Clive Wells and PhD Tony in the chat questioned both of you. What type of snake did you have to fight?
Yeah. Like if it's like a king cobra, man, they did not like you.
What if it's Tiamat?
Oof, you done fucked up. I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to say that on your channel.
Okay, Clive Wells had to fight an adder.
Ooh, that's rough.
No, well, as a computer scientist, an adder is just a low level digital logic circuit that adds things.
Yes, I've had to draw the diagrams for those.
Yeah.
But the snake, the adder, is in fact a much more dangerous thing than a simple adder.
PhD Tony wandered past an eastern brown snake. That's to everybody else, that's a turd. Just brown snake, just a long turd.
But one from the east, though.
Yes. Well, yes. Here's what he means. He had Indian food the day before, and it's a little squishy. It's not hard, and it comes out like, the Play-Doh Fun Factory. You know that one? It comes out like that.
Play before we talk too much about turds.
To reproduce after their kind. But most people hear a very different story than that, don't they? Most people...
Not really, because what you just described just is evolution. And that's the story that we get. That's one of the weird things about young earth creationism is they say that they're against evolution, but then they're like, yeah, but we need evolution. Because this whole kinds idea, right? It comes out of two things. One, we've just seen evolution happen in real time. So if you deny all of it, well,
so I think they make a distinction, right? They talk about capital E evolution and lowercase e evolution, right? And that
they try not to use the word evolution. They try to just use synonyms like adaptation, things like that.
But I get why they're trying to do that because it's an overloaded word, and they're making a distinction between the two forms of it. I get their,
but that's the problem. There actually aren't two forms of it.
Yeah,
the kind they accept is also the kind they don't accept. Just they don't accept it when it happens too much. Is basically what it comes down to.
Yeah, over too long of a period of time, which doesn't exist.
Right. Yep. So it's sort of like, I believe that erosion can form the gully out back with the stream, but you can't tell me that erosion formed the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, it's not soft enough.
It's like, well, it did. You don't have to believe it, but it is the same process.
We'll hear that over millions and millions and millions of years, through the process of natural selection and random mutations, that animals can actually change from one kind of creature into a completely different kind of creature over millions of years.
And see, again, this is that whole kind thing where they never really define that.
Yeah.
And the problem is that if you were to ever look at a speciation event in real time, right, which we've done, you have to look at short-lived animals or plants, but you can do it. It's been done in laboratories. But when you look at that, when they first split off, two sister species are going to be almost identical. But then one side is going to split off again, and the other side is going to split off again. And now this group of 4 species, well, this is a little bit different from this one, and that's a little bit more noticeable. And then as it progressively goes through time, yeah, they diverge more and more and more, unless, of course, they go extinct, in which case, well, it's over for them. But fundamentally, at every step of the way, you're pretty much the same thing as whatever your immediate ancestors were, right? So if we trace back, like imagine we look at, say, like imagine your mom and her mom and her mom and her mom. Eventually, you get back to something that does not look a whole lot like a modern Homo sapiens. But if you look at that organism and you look at its daughter and its mom, well, they're basically the same thing.
Yeah.
It's a gradual thing.
It all comes down to the necessity for not enough time to have existed, doesn't it?
Well, yes and no, because old Earth creationists will also make these arguments. So like Hugh Ross will also make this same kind of argument.
Oh, I did. Okay.
Yeah. So like I've talked to Fuzz Rana or Fazal Rana, who is a guy he works for Hugh Ross's Reasons to Believe.
Okay.
And he's actually the guy who's now doing like the day-to-day stuff because, Hugh Ross is mostly retired because he's like in his 80s or something, right?
Okay.
Like time to take a break guy. But yeah, we've talked about these things and, he has a lot of the similar talking points. Now, he doesn't have exactly the same talking points. Like he has different ideas about what the things that, science says are human ancestors or close cousins. He says that they're just a group of bipedal apes that God used to prepare animals to be hunted by humans, which it's a take. He's also described Homo sapiens crossings with Homo neanderthalensis, like producing hybrids, as bestiality, which I would not agree with. But,
If breeding is possible, they're of the same kind, right? So that's okay?
You'd have to ask Fuzz. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I've never figured out what he means by it. And it wasn't the topic of our conversation. So on top of our conversation was information. And that was a weird thing because I don't know if we get into it in this video, but creationists also love to waffle on about the word information without ever defining that either.
Yeah.
You guys have heard that idea, right? And you know what? These are two very opposing views. And our kids, when they're in school, they're smart and they know there's a difference between these two. And it might be addressed, for instance, in public schools where a science teacher might say, now, if you happen to be one of my students that goes to church, you believe Bible stories. And
okay, first of all, if you're in a public school and your teacher says something about you might be someone who goes to church or says, do you go to church or something like that, that's a red flag. Your teacher should not be addressing that topic. It's not what they're there for. They're not there to ask you about your religious affiliations or your church membership or anything like that.
Yeah.
If that's something that's happened to you or is happening to your kids, that's something you should probably report.
If those Bible stories give you hope and purpose and meaning in your life, I won't hold that against you. You can believe your Bible stories, but I just want to let you know, this is science class, and here we talk about facts. Now,
I also object to that wording, but I'm also going to acknowledge that's him making a straw man of a teacher and not an actual teacher asking these questions. The way that he is portraying what happens in schools is, I think, largely, one, inaccurate. And two, if that is accurate to someone's experience in school, it's inappropriate and it should be reported to the school administration. schools should not be telling you that your religion is false or whatever. What should happen is they should say something like, hey, some of you might disagree with what we're about to go over. You still have to learn it. This is what the curriculum is. And if you have like questions about it or something, maybe you can see me after school, or you can do something like that. Because one, classroom time is for getting the education done. And two, your professor or teacher or whatever should absolutely not be indicating that there's something wrong with or counterfactual or whatever about topics that are not germane, especially to do with your religious affiliation. Yeah. So don't
let them have their religion. So I remember in elementary school, in a rather fundamentalist Baptist church when I was a kid, being spoken to about what's going to happen to me when I'm in science class, and they're going to be asking me these questions. And I was put into me like this fear, like if I answer wrong, if I don't support the young Earth creation answer, that I would go to hell.
Yeah, that's also inappropriate.
That's what I was put into me. And I don't know if he was trying to do that. It was just what I got from it. So I wouldn't say that he was trying to be that or at all. But that's what I took from it. And so that was a problem for me. And I gave that up a long time ago, but I still have like these weird like feelings every once in a while. Like I'm supposed to feel that. I'm supposed to be a 6 day and 6,000 years. I'm like, I'm not, and shouldn't have that guilt. Like I don't have the guilt, but it's like this weird that still lingers.
No, I honestly do sometimes feel that way too, where it's like, okay, look, I have zero reason that's actually rational to believe any of this, but I was raised to believe it, and it still has a draw. And if I'm being honest, look, a lot about my life would be simpler if young Earth creationism were just true, right? Like, I would have a lot fewer like philosophical questions. I would have a very easy way to figure out what the history of the Earth is like. Yeah, I mean, sure, I'd have to do something different to, than all this, but like, whatever. There's so many. The Earth creationism, if it's true, would give you so many easy answers to big questions that, like, I would prefer it if it's true.
Well, yeah, because a lot of them, when you run into a problem, you just say, well, that's just how it was made. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Problem solved.
And if that's the answer, I think that's a little better choice than trying to shoehorn science into it.
Yeah. Camel spiders get an ugly prize, says Ernie Matthews. Camel spiders are adorable. I found one in my house a few months ago.
What?
And I took it outside and released it.
Oh my gosh. Like how big?
Probably about 1.5 centimeters as far as like the body. If you're counting like the first pair of legs in the length, then it's probably more like 3 centimeters.
Look at this guy flexing his scientific muscle, talking in centimeters instead of inches.
I have a science channel. I got to do centimeters.
Let me convert 1.5 centimeters there.
Okay.
That's just over half an inch.
Okay.
There you go.
So I guess 3 centimeters then would be a bit over, like, what would that be? Just under 2 inch or an inch?
Yeah. Why are you asking about that?
Because I don't keep inches around in my head.
It's nearly 1.25 inches.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But now I'll just tell you, 8 centimeters doesn't sound as impressive as 3 inches. So if you've got something that's 3 inches, wait, it does sound more. So if you've got something that's 3 inches, say 8 centimeters, it will sound more impressive.
To people who don't know what they're talking about when it comes to centimeters. Actually, a big part of it is, like, in addition to having a science channel, a lot of my viewers are from all over the world. And so if I give things in centimeters and centigrade and whatnot, it's easier for them.
Yeah.
And,
Do you see the decision that has to be made? And it's not just our kids, am I right? I mean, do any of you have family members that maybe have been told all their life that science has proven evolution to be the case? It is an issue.
Just like you might have been told all your life that the Earth is a globe. You never know. Those them. It's the same idea, right?
Nameless, faceless, yeah.
Yeah, there's a conspiracy in science to keep the truth from you. Why? Well, because the truth leads you to God and the science doesn't. But it's just not true. The vast, I can't say the vast majority, but the vast majority of Christian groups don't have a problem. Okay, I guess I can't say it that way. The vast majority of Christians belong to groups who have no particular problem with accepting evolution and the old age of the earth. That's how I can say it. Sorry, I didn't want to misspeak and say something I technically can't say. So if you add together the Anglicans, the Lutherans, the Presbyterians, the Eastern Orthodox, you've covered a huge swath of Christianity, and it's the majority of Christians. None of these are groups that say that you're not allowed to believe in evolution or accept the ancient age of the earth. They are all yeah, that's fine. And so that is most Christians. Now, I can't say that most Christians accept evolution and the old age of the earth because I don't have that data available per se, because I've never seen a poll that actually took a look at that worldwide. But what I can say is the vast majority of Christians belong to groups that either have accepted evolution as compatible officially or have just said, we don't care. So, yeah.
And we do need to have a defense for our faith. All right. If you didn't like science, I don't want you.
That cut was me. He just went into a whole bunch of stuff about this Bible verse says this about defending your faith. And you know what? Okay, sure. That's fine. It's just not what I'm here for.
Yeah.
Pull out a pillow and take a nap. I'm going to make it easy to understand. In fact, hopefully, I'm going to bring some things maybe you've never heard before.
So he's going to talk science.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is the very nature of science. I mean, what is it? When most people think about
does it prove things? Let's find out.
Science, the first thing that comes to their mind is what we would call operational or experimental science. Now, do you remember using the scientific method perhaps in junior high school?
That's not the scientific method on screen, by the way.
We should get this guy to talk to one of the flerfs who have the super dogmatic version of the scientific method about we have to have the specific what is it, independent variable where I move it around with my own fist or something.
Yeah. Well, now there are some flat earthers that say, the scientific method, observable, repeatable, testable. They say that they will say the same thing as, I don't know if maybe will he say that this is the scientific method? Is that what he's saying?
So he's saying that this is the operational scientific method, and he's going to contrast that with what he calls historical science.
Okay.
And this is not a distinction that is entirely exclusive to creationism and anti-evolution, but it is almost entirely exclusive. There have been some philosophers of science who've made this distinction as there is a way to distinguish science done about events in the past versus science done about things occurring now or in the future. But the actual methodology is basically the same. So it's a distinction without a difference.
These are just adjectives about something. This is not a method. This isn't a process. Right. This isn't, you could not call that a scientific method, the scientific method, because okay, well, what do I do for observational? Okay, I observe.
Look around, yeah.
Okay. Okay, but what it's doing is it's describing the scientific method, which is correct. It is observable, it is testable, right. It is repeatable. But that isn't. You can't just say this is the scientific method, right? Flat earthers can, at least when they get to their goofy thing, they can say this is the process of it, step, step, step.
Well, let's see what else he's got for us.
Yep.
Remember where you would develop a hypothesis, perform an experiment, make observations, record data, and you could repeat it.
I mean, normally you observe before the hypothesis, but whatever. It's an ongoing process. Okay. It has feedback. It's great.
This is the kind of science that's done right in the present, right before our own eyes, perhaps in the laboratory, in order to discover scientific principles. For example, if someone didn't believe in the law of gravity, okay, we could do
if someone didn't believe, if only we had people like that.
No,
what a weird world.
That, they don't exist. Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Experiment. We could make observations, record data. We could repeat.
I like how he was tossing that up as an example of gravity. It's oh boy, buddy, you don't even know about the gravity deniers. They would not accept that at all.
He might. I mean, certainly, if you draw the Venn diagram of the people in his audience and flat earthers, there's going to be a big overlap.
Yeah, there's gonna be a big overlap. It's like the flat earthers obviously going to be a smaller circle, right? There's a lot more creationists than flat earthers, but the flat earth circle is going to be mostly inside the young earth creationist circle. The young earth creationist circle is going to be much bigger and have a lot of people who are not flat earthers, which, I mean, you know, you've had Danny Faulkner on, right? Like, he's a young earth creationist. He's written a book against the flat earth. Also,
I've got it.
Yeah. Interestingly, we mentioned Kent Hovind. He used to have a video up until his channel, well, 3 of his channels got nuked from YouTube for repeated community guideline violations. But he used to have one where he was going to refute the flat earth. And all he did basically was just call flat earthers stupid, which, okay, 1, accurate.
Okay.
2, not really an argument. Like,
yeah, it's not.
He provided no actual evidence for the earth being round. All he did was say, well, you're stupid if you don't believe it. And oh, now my camera's all weird. Sorry about that. I'll fix it. But like, yeah, it was weird watching Kent Hovind try to dispute flat earth while having just no actual arguments. He didn't talk about like sunrises or sunsets. He just held up a globe and he's spun it. He's like, look, it's so obvious it's round. It's like, yeah, it is. But Kent, that's not an argument. You gotta have like a premise.
Yeah, do a little better.
Yeah. Anyway. But hey, nothing of value was lost in the nuking of 3 of his YouTube channels.
Until we established what was going on. You see, it's the type of science that's done in the present that allows us to make discoveries such that enable us to do space travel, or perhaps develop medical advances that benefit us all.
So one of the problems here is I think everyone here remembers a recent big news story that was happening a few years ago about a particular virus that was a novel virus. And a lot of the work that was done in tracking this virus, finding its origin, working on treatments, were actually based on evolutionary biology. Like, if you remember, like, every time we were tracking a new variant or there was new genetic studies being done that was publishing the genome of this virus and all that stuff, that's evolutionary biology. The idea that evolutionary biology does not provide medical treatments is completely inaccurate. Now, are all your medical advancements based on evolutionary biology? No, they're not. But are some of them, some of the important ones? Absolutely. In fact, one of the more famous examples was there was a girl who had a flesh-eating amoeba in her brain, and no one knew how to treat it because there were no approved methods for treating it. But the doctors got sent off the amoeba to a lab to have its DNA sequenced and realized, hey, it's closely related to this other pathogen that we treat with this drug. Based on evolutionary biology, if we give her the same drug, it should be effective. Lo and behold, it was, and she survived having her brain partially eaten because of evolutionary biology.
Oh.
So, like, this one, I have a short on my channel, and I don't do as much nuance as I would like in a short because it's a short. But one of the reasons that I do this is because anti-science is dangerous, right? Like I was talking about with the CMI people earlier, who were all up in arms about, like, oh, well, how dare you promote a vaccine to us that's going to save our lives? Once you start becoming a pseudoscience like enthusiast, someone who rejects the scientific consensus just because it's the consensus, someone who's willing to believe comfortable lies over hard scientific evidence, it affects you and your neighbors and the country and your country as a whole, right? The reason that there are currently deadly measles outbreaks is because of anti-vax sentiments. And anti-vax sentiments correlate strongly with other kinds of pseudoscientific nonsense. Yeah. Like, when was the last time you saw a pro-vaccine flat earther?
There's got to be a couple, but no, I haven't.
Yeah, it's similar with this. Most young earth creationists now are anti-vaccine. That was not always the case, but it is now.
Yeah.
And it's because of this mindset of, like, oh, these experts are trying to take me away from God, and I know the real secrets because I'm a super smart guy who figured out the earth is 6,000 years old and flat. It all comes together. And once you start rejecting science for silly conspiracy theory reasons, that's what follows. People die. There are right now people who are dead because they were trained to reject science by young earth creationists that this guy works for, who would not be dead today if they had not been so trained. And I think that's a tragedy, and it's one of the big reasons I do this. I mean, I also have fun with it, but yeah, it is entertainment, right? What we do here, but it's also serious. People have their lives on the line, and not just the pseudoscientists and the conspiracy theorists. There are people who caught deadly viruses because their family either did not allow them to get vaccinated if they're, minors, or their family themselves did not get vaccinated and pass it on to them. Someone's grandma is dead because that person was a young Earth creationist who became an anti-vaxxer because of his anti-science beliefs and then passed it on to his grandma. That's a thing that happens. This is deadly serious, as well as hilarious.
However, did you know that when we're talking about evolution, or for that matter, anything in the past, did you know it's not this type of science?
I did not know that. In fact, it is this kind of science.
That's new, yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is, conceptually, you can create an idea of a difference between, science about things that already happened versus science about things that will happen. And I guess my green screen is going crazy. I don't know, whatever. But fundamentally, it's the same thing, right? Okay. Paleontology, it's pretty much all about stuff that happened in the past, right? Because obviously. Okay, but how does paleontology work? Well, first we observe things like, okay, we've seen these kinds of fossils here and these kinds of fossils here. We have a hypothesis about these fossils are related on some basis or another. And we think, okay, well, what would the common ancestor of these groups look like? And we come up with predictions about what it would look like. And then we say, what kind of environment would it have lived in and how long ago would it have lived? And then, okay, once we can figure all that out, then we can make a prediction. I predict that I will find the common ancestor of, say, or something that represents the morphology of the common ancestor of all tetrapods shortly after they're split from other fish. And, these, say, Devonian swampy areas. And then you look at a map and you say, okay, Ellesmere Island in Canada has some of those strata from the right time in the right environment. And then you go look and you find exactly what you predicted, and your name is Neil Shubin, because this is a real story that really happened in real life. Evolutionary biology lets us predict future data that we will collect that is about the past.
That's pretty cool.
Right. And so when they say that this isn't testable, repeatable, or observable, it's just flatly wrong. If I can test evolutionary biology by deciding where to dig to find the fossil I'm looking for, and then I'm successful, and other people can do that, that is testable and repeatable and observable. And also, in order to say that we can't use principles that we learn about present in the past is to reject one of the fundamental aspects of science that's so basic that most people don't even think about it, which is the temporal invariance of physics, basically, or of scientific principles. The idea being that, big G, right, the gravitational constant.
Yeah.
That was the same 200 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 2 million years ago, and it's going to be the same tomorrow, and in 10 days, and in 100 days, and in 1,000, and whatever. Yeah. That's just it's not going to change. If you want to reject that so that you can say that we can't use the present scientific principles and project them backwards in time, you also can't say that you can project them forward in time, and now you just can't do science at all, because any principle that you determine, let's say you do the Cavendish experiment, right? And you're like, okay, here's my value for big G. Well, if you can't be reasonably assured that that's going to stay the same tomorrow, why did you bother in the first place? And so in order to make this distinction, they have to reject that most basic aspect of science that basically says scientific principles are valid across time. Yeah. Because you don't get to make a special exception for the past. Because in the past, if they were different, that means that if you were living in the past, they would be different for your future. And we're living in some arbitrary time.
If it's consistent, if it's consistently changing versus in the past, and I think I've heard this, in the past, some constants of nature were different, and then they changed, and now they're not different anymore, and now they're fixed.
There are ways that we can measure things like that. And generally, but that is the kind of thing you have to check for.
As a here's how young Earth could have happened.
Oh, yeah. They'll say things like that, especially for things that they don't have any evidence for. One of the things they love to do is take processes that really can't vary in their rate. Things like spontaneous nuclear decay, which is defined by things like the force of the strong nuclear force and like the fine structure constant and things like that. And they'll say, well, what if that was just different in the past? And it's like, well, it literally can't be. It's physically impossible. And
well, yeah, because all sorts of other things would not have functioned.
Right.
Like matter just flying apart.
Literally, yeah. I mean, things that now are stable nuclei would be if that something like that happened. Yeah. But on the other hand, they'll take things that we know vary, like erosion rates at the coast, or the rate of like change in the strength of the dipole moment of Earth's magnetic field. And they'll say, yeah, but what if actually those things were set in stone constants that have never changed? And it's like, well, what if? Yeah, but they're not. We know they're not. And they just make this little switcheroo. It's like spontaneous nuclear decay, super variable, could be anything. Coastal erosion rates, though, you can set your watch by that. That's constant. Of course it's not.
No.
Storms happen. Like, just a storm changes that. So those are also, by the way, real examples that I have heard young Earth creationists use.
Yeah.
You see, what we're talking about here is what many call forensic or perhaps historic science. Now, let's say in the same way that someone here were to believe that a fish, over millions and millions and millions of years, of passing on its genetic information to future generations through the process of natural selection.
Real quick, evolution is about populations, not individual, and he said a fish. I'm going to let it go and just say, I'm assuming he thinks, or he's talking about a population of fish. But technically, by saying a fish, he's doing a little bit of a straw man. But I don't want to be that nitpicky. I just want to make sure that everyone knows that, like, yeah, that is an error, but compared to some of the other errors he makes, it's not that big a deal.
And random mutations, that one of its offsprings millions of years later would add information to its genome so that it would sprout new novel structures that would allow it to walk up onto land.
And there's the first use of information. So here's a fun thing. I'm actually going to give a book recommendation, if I may.
Go ahead.
So I previously mentioned Neil Shubin, who discovered Tiktaalik after predicting that he would discover it in that area in Canada. He wrote a book called, I believe, Finding Your Inner Fish. I highly recommend it. It's great. And one of the things it goes through is the genetics and the embryology of the difference between the development of fins and the development of, like tetrapod limbs. And you might be interested to know that they're going from a fin, like a fish, to a limb like this with, individual fingers and a hand and whatnot. It doesn't actually require any new genes at all. The genes that govern the development of limbs in fish and tetrapods are the same genes. What's different is their pattern in which they turn on and off in embryology.
Okay.
And so, because in embryology, genes can only tell your cells to do one of four things. They can tell them grow in whatever direction. They can tell them to differentiate to a different cell type, like skin cells or liver cells or whatever. They can tell them to fold in a little like U shape, right? And then they can tell them to die. That's it. And the difference between the different anatomies of organisms like fish and humans is just the difference in when certain cells are told to grow, die, fold, or differentiate. And so if you have a mutation or something that says, hey, the genes that are governing this limb development, just say grow for a little bit longer, you get a longer limb. Or if you have the gene that says, why don't you fold? And it comes up in a different pattern, there will be different folding patterns in whatever's coming out of this end of your limb, and you'll get different digit or fin patterns. And when you say, hey, cells here between these digits, why don't you go ahead and die, leaving a separate digit? And that's how you go from having webbing to just having separate digits. And we can see this in modern mutations as well as in embryological studies, where instead of actually switching the genes on and off, the chemical signals are artificially introduced directly by the experimenter to produce the effects of a different genetic setup.
Yeah.
So there's actually there's no new information. It's the same genes working in a different pattern to produce the changes in morphology that we have. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't any new genes going from fish to tetrapod. There are, but fundamentally, that idea that you need to write a new entry in the book of the DNA that says arm, Like, that's not how it works.
Okay.
But he doesn't know that, so he's presenting that. And intuitively, you think, well, the DNA is like, the blueprint of my body, right? That's when I was being developed, how my body looks was largely determined by the DNA. And that's true, but it's not in the same way as a blueprint. You don't have to draw in a new arm. It's the same developmental genes that do the whole thing, because fundamentally, the genome does not function like a book. It doesn't function like blueprints. It has a very different kind of function. I'll hit play.
Now, if you believe that to be true, can you do an experiment showing that's the case?
Yes.
Can you observe it happening?
Yes, you can. In fact, we have done experiments on this on fish to see them develop more or less tetrapod-like limbs, as well as we've seen this transition from fins to tetrapod limbs directly in the fossil record. So all of this is both observable and repeatable.
I had to look up tetrapod. Can you define it for, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one. Could you define it for, you've used it a lot.
So tetrapods are the animals that ancestrally have 4 walking limbs. So some tetrapod lineages have lost these limbs, like snakes have lost all their limbs for the most part. Whales have lost their hind limbs. Again, for the most part, every once in a while, a dolphin is born with little tiny hind flippers. It does happen. But yeah, so like reptiles, mammals, amphibians, as well as some extinct forms that are not technically any of those, are all tetrapods. And that includes birds, because birds are in fact reptiles. So.
All right.
Yeah. You're a tetrapod.
You're a tetrapod.
That's true, I am.
Jerk face calling me names.
It's repeatable. All right. See, now this is a fossil right here, okay? Now,
if this were my channel, we would drink for him getting something right. That is indeed a fossil. You did it, buddy. So in case anyone doesn't know, over on my channel, we have, it's primarily a joke, right? But we do have a drinking game, and you can feel free to drink along. And one of our drinks is whenever the creationist actually gets a point of fact correct, and we generally get very generous by the end because they said so much nonsense that eventually they'll be like, now, if you look at this website, I'm like, yep, that is a website. Good job. We'll take a quick drink because there's so little they get right.
question, does this fossil exist in the past or the present?
Okay. 2, does this fossil exist in the past or the present?
Well, he was holding it. It holds it. It exists in the present. I know what he's talking. He's talking. Did the animal exist in the past?
Well, I think he's actually trying to trick his audience into saying it exists in the past because that's when the animal was alive, and then he's going to say, actually, the fossil is now. And like, I gotcha.
Oh,
I think that's what he's going to go for.
Okay, wait. Let me see if I can clarify the question a little bit. Does this fossil exist in the past or the present?
Yeah,
present. You see, when we dig up a fossil, tell me, does it come with a label on it that tells us how old it is or what it ate or how it lived? No.
Actually, in some cases, for what it ate, the answer is yes, because gut contents are sometimes preserved. And if there's a bunch of like berries and leaves inside the gut of a fossilized animal, well, it probably ate berries and leaves. And if there's a bunch of like lizards or little hatchling dinosaurs, it probably ate those things. As far as the age, though, this is something that is always weird to me because young Earth creationism obviously rejects things like radiometric dating, right? Which is normally how we determine how old things like this are.
Yeah.
But we don't need radiometric dating to know that young Earth creationism has a timeline that's way too short. And the reason is because of something called stratigraphy, right? So when you see different layers of rock in the Earth, different kinds of rock you can determine how they formed, what they're made of, the environment that formed them, things like that, right? So you can say, okay, this is a fluvial sandstone that formed in a high energy environment. Okay, this over here, this is a marine limestone that formed in an anoxic environment. Over there, that's a mudstone that formed in an alluvial fan. You can tell these things, right? Because in the present, we can look at how rocks form. And every rock that is sedimentary, which is the rocks we generally find fossils in, has 2 time frames that you can associate with it. There's a minimum deposition time, which is to say, we know about how fast at absolute maximum physics will allow certain rocks, the particles that make up certain rocks, to deposit, right? And so if we say with limestone, organic limestone really can't deposit any faster than about 2 centimeters every millennium. like physically the particles can't settle out faster than that because they're so small. And so any higher than that, you're going to need new physics to explain. And until you get new physics, your idea is done. And we also have what's called a lithification time. Now, these are a little bit harder to calculate because they can be changed by things like pressure and temperature. But generally speaking, we can get good estimates for lithification times for most rocks, which is to say, how long does it take between going from just a bunch of particles that are loose at the bottom of wherever they've been deposited to actually being a compactified solid rock that, like is hard and solid, right? Like, and the problem is that there's too much rock of too many kinds that form slowly. You're just going to the Grand Canyon. There is a formation of limestone that's like 100 meters tall. And if you think about, okay, first of all, limestone compacts when it turns to rock, which means when it was deposited, this 100-meter limestone bed was probably more like 200 to 300, maybe even 400 meters if it was particularly loosely packed initially. But let's say 200 just for the sake. Okay, so 200 meters. The fastest it can deposit is about a centimeter per millennium. Sorry, 2 centimeters per millennium. So if this were deposited under absolutely ideal conditions, we take that 2,000 and we multiply it by another 1,000, right? To get how many time or how long it would take that in years. Okay. And then it also has to take time, which is going to be similar to the lithification time for limestone, because I've looked this one up. And so we're looking at a minimum time to form this part of the Grand Canyon of like 4,000 or 5,000 years on its own. But then we also have to explain the sandstones and the shales and the other parts of the Grand Canyon. So just the Grand Canyon on its own, there's too much rock for 6,000 years to be the time scale of Earth.
Yeah.
Just on its own.
So you just explained all this stuff, and you had explained some of it already. And then while you were explaining it, Andrew Irwin said, so we know the age of the fossils by the age of the rock they are found in, and can tell how old the rock is by the fossil you find in it.
Okay. So what he's talking about is a thing called index fossils. So index fossils are a way that scientists in the field kind of get like a general age for whatever rock they're working in before it's more carefully determined. And it's actually not the case that we determine the age of rocks by fossils. What actually happens is, first, there's two ways to date rocks. There's relative and absolute dating. So relative dating is just this rock is older than this rock is younger than this rock up here. Okay. And that doesn't give us actual ages, like with a number you can put on it, right? This is sort of like the, like when you're doing engineering and like you're just doing like sign and unit analysis to see if you're even in the right ballpark with your calculations. So like you do a little bit of like, okay, like this is positive, this is negative, these are the units. And then you're like, I bet centimeters per degree Celsius meter squared times hours. I probably screwed something up.
It's a dimensional analysis, which is the cheat code for physics.
Yeah, which I love, by the way. I remember a friend of mine was like, I'm going to calculate the math behind Iron Man's suit and how much energy it would take. And I'm like, dude, you're doing your math wrong. He's like, how do you know? It's like, because your units are coming out at kilograms per second. That's not how you measure power. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, look at the units, dude. He's like, oh yeah, I guess I did screw that up. It's like, yeah, okay. So it's similar to that, right? Where we're not getting numbers, we're just getting this more than this, more than this. Okay. That's done with stratigraphy, where we say, okay, these fossils are always found above these fossils when we determine the orientation of the rocks, because they can shift, but you can figure out which way they should shift back, because there's a rule called original horizontality, which says that unless you have extremely good reason to think otherwise, the sedimentary layers are laid down horizontally, and you can tell which way is the top and the bottom versus by things like which way fossils are oriented in it. Anyway, absolute dating, which is how we actually figure out, like on screen, 75 million years ago. That's done with radiometric dating. Now, after stratigraphy has been done, if there are particular fossils that are very, very characteristic of a particular stratum of rock, then you can use that elsewhere in the world to say, okay, I found this particular kind of fossil that's very unique to this particular stratum. I'm probably in that same stratum now in my current study. And then what you do is you work with that assumption and you work to get a better date, both stratigraphically, as well as with radiometric dating. So at no point are you just saying with your final answer, well, I found a trilobite, therefore I'm in the Silurian. No one's doing that. But index fossils are a real thing, and they are used as a rule of thumb, as a quick way to get an idea of where you're working in the column of rocks. So that is a somewhat long form answer to that question.
All right.
So what we have to do is we have to take the evidence that's with us in the present, and we paint a picture of what we believe happened in the past. Now, here's another question. In fact, we're going to vote with a show of hands.
So I want to point out that we use the evidence in the present to paint a picture about the past. That's how science just kind of works.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you want to know what happened in the past and there's present evidence of it, you use science. In fact, they even called it forensic science. Creationists aren't out there saying that we should release all the murderers convicted on DNA evidence or fingerprint evidence or anything, even though that's evidence about the past that we collected in the present.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know how many creationists have ever known a murder victim, but I can tell you firsthand 3 times over, I would prefer that the murderers be convicted than that they not, because of your silly ideas about science. I have firsthand knowledge on that one.
The chat is talking about relative dating.
There's also that thing that's popular in places like Alabama and Louisiana, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Some parts of Tennessee.
Yeah, I hear it's legal there.
Yeah.
Actually, I believe it's actually legal in Massachusetts, which is the state I grew up in. Or sorry, it's the Commonwealth I grew up in. It's not a state; it's a Commonwealth.
Yes, and that is how some scammers have been identified, by sending emails to government employees in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Yeah, if you tell the government that it's the state of Massachusetts, they'll be like, no, this is the Commonwealth.
You're not getting an email from your coworker where the verbiage is state of Massachusetts.
Yeah, no, you're not. That's Commonwealth. Yeah. In fact, at one point, shortly after I moved to Arizona, Massachusetts was trying to get me for tax money for work I'd done in Arizona.
The tax evader.
Yeah. It turns out, no, I was not evading my taxes. I didn't owe those taxes that they thought I owed. And I did demonstrate it after providing them with lots of documentation. But I was very careful on all my my discussions with them, which was mostly by email, to say, the Commonwealth. I have not resided or worked in the Commonwealth in the past year and a half, and which is the entire time that you're trying to charge me taxes for. Because they were like, hey, man, you owe us like $500 for this 3 months. I'm like, no, I don't. But yeah, that got resolved. It was a big hassle. But anyway, that's not why we're here.
Do you mind if I read a few super chats here?
Oh, absolutely. Go for it.
All right. If you want to stop sharing, you can. Let's
sorry.
Let's give that a shot here.
I'm used to me being the producer, and I just don't even think about what it takes when I'm not the producer.
Yeah. Well, it's a whole different thing here. So, all right. We got Fursy31. Fuhrsy is a new member at Einstein. Awesome. Thank you for that. Tad says, 2 great tastes that taste great together. Yay, Dapper and Tune.
We're like peanut butter and chocolate, I guess.
Don't taste us.
I don't consent.
Mr. Toffee says, Tune for top left. No, that's...
I have to refill my Tune Shine here. I have a supply of Tune Shine.
Don't
keep going. I brought extra with me to the desk.
Oh, good. Okay. The Life says, I finally watched the Dean Odell versus Greg Locke debate. Dean is a full-blooded flerf, not a sane person.
Wait, are you saying that you don't think it was Satan that you saw when you were in Antarctica?
No, it wasn't. It was just the sun, the same sun everybody else saw.
Okay, but if it were Satan shapeshifted into the sun, how would you know?
It's a good point. It's rather unfalsifiable, but I mean, then he could be anything then, right?
That's one of the problems with using Satan as your excuse as to why something happened, is ultimately it ends up with Satan being God. And okay, well, now what do you do?
I hate when that happens.
Yeah.
Jack Fetter says, oh, my cat, logic overflow, my brain can't process, not able to buffer overload, brain rebooting. The Sun Express says, it's my lucky day. My fave two YouTubers all at once at the same time. AIG is still a sack of phallic potatoes. So
do you want the explanation on that one?
Phallic potatoes?
Well, so for a while, AIG were going around issuing copyright copyright notices against basically anyone who's using any of their footage, including as fair use, including footage that was actually of them using other copyrighted material under fair use that then ended up in my video. And they were like, no, that's ours. It's like, actually, it's not. It was fair use when you use it, and it's fair use when I'm using it. Oh. And that happened to me. It happened to Apologia. It happened to Godless Engineer. It happened to Gutsick Gibbon, a whole bunch of people.
All of them. Were they trying to like not have you using their stuff for your debunks?
I can't say for certain because I never directly corresponded with them. I just challenged all of them, and eventually YouTube cleared me on all of them. So I don't know what their motive was. And the copyright claims were coming from their media management company. Because usually when you get a copyright claim, for the audience, I'm sure you know, too, it's usually from some kind of holding company or someone that some group is hired. So I don't know exactly all the details, but because I do have a drinking game on my show, which again is mostly just a joke, and you definitely don't have to drink if you want to come and hang out. But one of our triggers is if anyone super chats or membership milestone chats that AIG is a bag of dicks or anything approximating that, I'll take a drink.
Well, I will too. Oh, hold on. You talk. I'm gonna go. Obtain some.
Yes, you got to go get some more Toonshine. It's got the same proof as Young Earth Creationism. So, let's see. Now I don't know what to talk about. I've been abandoned. Answers in Genesis is a weird group, and I've actually been talking a lot less about them lately because they've shifted onto culture war stuff. So like now, if you look at like the current output of Answers in Genesis, like if you look at Answers News, it's almost always like, and then a trans person existed, and we're angry about it. I'm like, okay, I guess it's not okay, but like, what are you doing? Jessica Bell has the correct spelling of abandoned. That's true. Toon abandoned me. So let's see. What is AIG? That's Answers in Genesis. So this is for Kipter. Oh, you got a pronunciation. I like that. So Answers in Genesis is probably the most well-off and prominent young earth group in North America. They have a branch in Canada, and I know they have a branch in Australia. I don't know about where else, but I suspect they have other ones. I don't actually know because I generally only listen to creationism stuff in English. I've tried doing some of it in Spanish, but the problem is, from what I've found, Spanish language young earth creationist content is just English language creationist content, but from 30 years ago. So like if you listen to like young earth creationist stuff from like the 90s, it sounds exactly what Spanish language young earth creationism is doing right now, from what I can tell. So I just haven't bothered. There was a good week or so, though, where I was just going through as much Spanish language young earth creationism as I could to see if there's any worth in responding to any of it, even if I had to put in subtitles and whatnot. There wasn't. Let's see. Dr. Tapioca Weasel says, who is this chump? Looks old and adopted. Well, I am old. I'm like 150 years old. This is just the human suit. And yeah, I was adopted into human society, which is how I got a human suit and know how to do things like speak English and pay taxes and horrible things like that. Yeah, but hey, I'm still under the jurisdiction of dinosaur court. So unless you know a dinosaur lawyer, you better not get in trouble with me. That's a thing. Hey, look, Toon is back. I was giving some background lore about how I'm in fact 150 million years old because I'm a dinosaur.
What kind of dinosaur again?
I'm a Ceratosaurus nasicornis.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, Ceratosaurus is usually enough. There aren't that many species of Ceratosaurus.
All right.
Toon, that Toonshine looks different.
This is different Toonshine. It is it is something my son made for me. And nice. I think it's an Arnie Palmer.
Oh, okay.
A hard Arnie Palmer.
Obviously, it's got as much proof again as creationism or flerfism.
No, it's got a non-zero amount of proof.
Oh, Oh my goodness. Wow, it's got much more proof.
But
Are you having trouble opening?
it's resistant to opening.
You gotta pass that strength check.
Oh my goodness, it is on hard. It's not. All right, hold on.
Wow, Tad knows 3 dinosaur lawyers. That's impressive.
What do you mean dinosaur? What's a dinosaur lawyer?
Oh, that's a lawyer who's licensed to practice in dinosaur court, too. You don't think we use the same courts as all those humans, do you?
Oh. All right.
Yeah, that's why I'm immune to being sued by humans, because you have to go to dinosaur court. They're the ones who have jurisdiction.
You challenge jurisdiction.
Excuse me,
Sometimes
I'm not subject to human laws. I'm actually a dinosaur.
is
I feel like
this
that might not go over well in court.
all right? I got it. I don't know. I think it's sweetened. That's why it's crusty.
Yeah, the sugar stuck it. Yeah.
All right.
Should we continue with super chats, or should we play on the video?
I owe a. I don't think I want that to be what I. That's not going to be the drinking game, but I'll give you the one right now.
Fair enough.
Oh, that's good.
Nice.
Okay.
Photopolymer are pretty good.
Yeah, with something that's more than 0 proof. Okay, we got Kairoy, corn, one of the most genetically modified crops in human history, no longer similar to any of its predecessors. Mm-hmm. Yeah, God definitely did that.
It's actually a really good example. If you look at the plant that is the same species as corn, but that grows in the wild, it's called teosinte. It's just a grass. It's just grass.
Yeah.
That grows low on the ground and shoots up a little thing with a few little kernels, and that's it.
So genetically modified, or was it like genetic modification is quite a bit newer, at least in what people think it is, than hybridization or selective breeding?
I like to say it was genetically modified the slow way, and we've now figured out how to genetically modify crops the fast way. Because ultimately, what selective breeding is you picking which genetic traits you want in your future crops, which is also what genetic modification is. It's just that when you're doing it the old-fashioned slow way with just selective breeding, you have to wait for mutations to occur that are advantageous for you as the person growing the crop, so that you can then breed that into your wider selection of crops.
And hopefully it sticks.
Right. If you're doing it the fast way, we've actually invented 2 fast ways. One was atomic gardening. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. But basically, you put a radiation source in the middle of a circular garden, and then there's different tiers that go out, and you just let the radiation from that source create mutations faster than normal in the crops. And most of the stuff you grow in there is going to be worthless, and you're going to throw it out. But every once in a while, you get the ruby red grapefruit, and that's why we have ruby red grapefruits. It was a mutation that occurred in an atomic garden.
Wow. All right.
So that's the first fast way, but it's pretty uncontrolled. The new fast way is actually just importing the gene into the genome of the target crop and saying, okay, you now have a flatfish antifreeze gene, tomato, boom, now you're resistant to frost.
And where does grafting fit in that?
So grafting, it's not a genetic change.
Yeah.
It's more like a weird surgery, right? Because you generally when you graft, you have to use relatively similar plants that aren't just going to be like rejected by each other, and just because they're too
like a lion and a tiger,
right? And so when you do that, you can get things like you can use the stem.
You cut the leg off the lion and you graft it onto the tiger.
I mean,
then you get the panther, you cut its leg off, you graft it onto the other side, right? This is simple stuff.
Dapper
We're
dinosaur
solving problems.
Does not support making Frankencats. So I just putting that out there. Should I share, or do we want to go through more super chats?
I got just a couple more. Okay. Tad says, "Hail the F-bomb fund for Dapper." Matthew a lot says it's bad because we have like the top 10 most venomous snakes in the world in Australia, and Eastern Bryn is like the 3rd. I don't know what Eastern Bryn is. Eastern Brown. I think Matthew a lot has been hitting the toonshine.
Hey, me too.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, Tony was talking, PT Tony was talking about never having visited Chicago. And I gave him a little advice, and I'll give everybody the advice. If you ever do find yourself in Chicago, so what you want to do is you want to get to the Nike store on Michigan Avenue, go up to the top floor. They've got the best bathrooms in case you need to release an eastern brown snake.
Okay. My experience with Chicago was short, but I got to say this. The guys in the gang colors hanging out in the parking lot were much more helpful and nicer to me than the guy in the blue uniform with a badge. They gave me directions to get where I was going. The guy in the badge put me in handcuffs while he searched my car for no reason. So my experience is that the gangs in Chicago are way better than the cops.
And the gang members were nice enough to put on a glove. The cop, not so much.
No, they literally, there was I'm lost in Chicago at night. I'm trying to get myself from Seattle to Boston as fast as possible because a friend of mine is in the hospital with cancer and we don't know if he's going to make it. And I want to get to Boston before he doesn't make it. And I didn't really have the money for a flight and I could swing the gas money. This was a while back. And yeah, I got lost in Chicago. And so I pull into a corner store and there's just a bunch of guys with do-rags all the same color. And I'm like, yep, this is a gang. I'm like, you know what?
Puffy coats in warm weather?
I don't remember that specifically. But I'm like, hey, which way to this highway? And they're like, oh, take this exit and take the third left or whatever. I'm like, okay, thanks. And then later on, I took a wrong exit because there was a lot of traffic and I had trouble getting to the right lane because I wasn't able to predict where the right lane was. So I turned off at another exit and I go to a parking lot and I'm looking at my street map because this is still back when not everyone had a smartphone and I didn't. And next thing I know, cop knocks on the window and I'm in handcuffs in the back of the cop car while he searches my car for weed, which I did not have any of. So I was released, but yeah, okay. Note to self. The gangs are better than the cops here. Got it.
Wow. All right. Jack Fetter says, I think he just dissed your mom's mom. Because she doesn't look, she looks like, yeah, that was low. The Sun Express says, has anybody called back Lonely Steve from UK? I should call him. I've got his phone number.
Oh my goodness. I'm sure that phone number didn't leak anywhere. I think you got it entirely legitimately.
No, it was because Will had it, and Will tried to message him on my phone.
Okay.
And it did not go through.
Man, that guy is psycho.
He thinks that everybody in the world cares about calling him when he thinks that they should call him, but he didn't tell them when he should call them.
You're just supposed to know.
Yeah, you just have to. And if you didn't do it when he thinks you should, then you're too late. And it's because you're a jerk face.
How dare you?
Tim Davidson says, I have a ring with 34 million year old dino bone and 63 million year old meteorite. When I see a YEC, I just show them that. I call it my existential crisis ring.
So I'm going to say, if it's 34 million year old dinosaur bone, that also means it's bird bone because the only dinosaurs around 34 million years ago were birds.
You have to go farther back?
Yeah, to get to the first non-bird dinosaurs that you're going to find, you have to go 67 million years back.
Oh.
Yeah.
The Sun expresses the heat problem, eternal bane of all young Earth creationists.
Yeah, do you know what the heat problem is, too?
Yeah, it's in the summer in Minnesota in this room because we don't have an air conditioner. And yeah, it's like a heat problem until I install the air conditioner in the window.
Young Earth creationists wish that was the heat problem. Because what it actually is so there's a few different models. And I say model in big quotes because it's like a flat Earth model. It doesn't really exist. Huh? But just like with flat Earth, you can make conclusions based off these flood models of how the flood happens. And the problem is that every single flood model that's been proposed would result in an amount of heat being released over the course of the year or so of Noah's flood that it would be equivalent to the energy released of multiple Hiroshima bombs per square meter per day for the entire year.
That's too many.
Yeah, one is too many. One over every square meter at once is too many, but they're happening multiple times per day. In fact, in some flood models, it's multiple times per second.
This is to make what fit?
So the thing is, they don't just say that there was a bunch of water and then it went away, right? Because they also have to explain things like where did the rocks come from? Why is there so much evident nuclear decay? How did the continents shift around? Because they're like, well, there were supercontinents because the rocks match up, and they don't want to deny that.
Yeah.
So like, okay, so all of it happened during the flood, all the nuclear decay, all the volcanoes, all the impacts from asteroids that we know of, all the continents shifting around, slamming into each other. And then some of them also say that all the craters on all the planets and moons in the solar system are actually stuff that was ejected from Earth during the flood, which means you have to get all that energy into Earth.
It's new.
Yeah. It's actually not new. That's from way back in the 70s. That's an idea from back then.
Wow.
That's an uncommon position. It's like Walt Brown and a few of his fans believe that one, but any of them result in an Earth that, like, the level of energy is hard to comprehend, but like, you know what gravitational binding energy is?
Explain it.
Okay, so most objects in the solar system are not held together like the same way that, say, this mason jar is, right? This is held together primarily by intermolecular forces between the molecules of the glass, right? But most things in the solar system... Did
you get that mason jar for free?
I did. This is in fact a free mason jar, although it's actually ball mason. As a ball mason. Yes. But yes, this is a free mason jar. Oh, right. So most things in the solar system are not bound that way, right? Like if you've ever gone outside and picked up a rock, you can tell that rock is not connected to Earth by intermolecular forces. It's just gravity, right? So you can add up how much gravitational potential energy exists in an object in space total, and that's called the gravitational binding energy. Okay. And if you do something to that object that exceeds the gravitational binding energy, well, it will probably fly apart, Alderaan style.
Yes.
And many of the flood models exceed energy release. Their energy release exceeds the gravitational binding energy of Earth, which means that there's a fair chance that if this happened, Earth would fly apart, again, Alderaan style. And if it didn't, it would just be a bunch of plasma. And I know that Noah's Ark is supposed to be made out of gopher wood. We don't know what kind of wood gopher wood is, but I'm pretty sure it's not immune to plasma and nuclear explosions. So that's the heat problem. And creationists have tried over and over and over again to come up with ideas to solve this. One was hypercanes, right? Super big hurricanes that during the flood would have taken up huge swaths of the globe. And so a friend of mine, of my channel,
moved the continents?
Well, no, that's just to release the heat. The continents are going on their own thing because of the mantle heating up, and now the hypercanes are going to shed that heat to space. Because hurricanes sheds heat to space. They do.
Okay. So
a really big hurricane would shed more heat. So a friend of the channel, Jordan, from his own channel, Reason to Doubt, he ran the math on this, and he said, okay, if there were total global coverage of hypercanes, so the entire Earth is covered in hypercanes, which is the maximum that could happen, even though even that is beyond the actual maximum, because that's not physically possible. We'll just assume. And they're going for the entire 370-ish days of the flood. So the entire duration, which you also know isn't happening because for about 80 of those days, Noah is calmly either floating or resting on a mountain. Yeah. So that doesn't quite work, but we'll just assume the entire 370-ish days, hypercanes. That gets rid of approximately 0.01% of the heat problem from the most modest version of the heat problem.
Yeah, to make up a little more, huh?
Yeah, they need a little help there. Then there was another guy who said, well, maybe the heat went to the mantle. But I'm sure most of your audience knows that heat generally flows from hot to cold. So for heat to go from the crust to the mantle, the crust has to be hotter than the mantle. Yeah. And if the crust is hotter than the mantle, you haven't solved the heat problem. You're just acknowledging the heat problem.
Yeah, the water would have not stuck around.
Yeah, so that's what the heat problem is. And I don't know if this guy's going to get too much into the heat problem, but
okay.
I feel like I should probably share.
Two more here. Lisa says, language of species 5008, Klingon detected. Assimilation commencing. Resistance is futile. Thanks for coming, Dapper.
Thank you. Actually, Craig McNeil in my upcoming Star Trek game is going to be playing an ex-Borg Klingon. So
wow.
there you go.
All right. Dr. Tapioca Weasel says, who's this chump? Looks old and adopted. And I do have one more. Tad says, where's the window, Toon? Where's the window? It's covered up with recycled pallet wood. Okay.
All right, here we go. Let me hit the button. I know how this works. All right.
And that is, who has the most evidence, evolution or creation? Now, how many people say evolution has the most evidence? Okay, how many people say creation has the most evidence? All right, can I ask you a follow-up question? When a paleontologist is looking at the fossil record that's available to observe in the present, in the very...
I gotta see what we get. Oh, we just have a T-Rex and a shrimp. That's boring.
museums, as well as in the paleontological digs around the world.
I'll give creationists this. They can more reliably say big words like paleontological. I would not expect Traycation to be able to say paleontological.
Do the creation scientists and the evolutionary scientists, do they have the same or different evidence and facts to observe in the present?
Yeah, his audience has just said the same, but this is actually demonstrably not true. So on my channel, I rely a lot on a group of people that we call ourselves the science friends, right? And so we all do different bits of research projects and we share the results and whatnot. So two of the science friends, Jackson Wheat and RJ Downard, actually released a book that talks about this topic, right? Like how much evidence of what's available do creationists typically incorporate into their literature? And the answer is about 10%.
Huh.
On any given topic, they usually ignore approximately 90% of the evidence. So when this guy says that creationists and evolutionists, which is kind of silly words like Glober, have the same evidence, in the sense that the same evidence is available to both of them, that's true. But in the sense that they both actually take into account the same amount of evidence, that's just absolutely false. It is demonstrable that they tend to use only about 10% of the available evidence. And you might not be surprised, but it's the 10% that is the least troublesome for them that they use. They tend to cherry pick. And is it the first law of flerf that flerf citations never actually support the flerf?
Yeah, they contradict. Yep.
Yeah. So there's a weaker version for creationists, which is to say that creationist citations never support the creationists. They don't always contradict, because sometimes you get a citation, it's just like, well, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So I can't say it contradicts, but it doesn't help. And the only exception to that is when they cite each other, right? So like, oh, but my young earth creationist buddy, he said, I'm like, okay, well, great. Do you have anything that's actually really published in a real journal? No, because they have their journals, but they're journals the same way Flat Earth University is a university.
Yeah. So there are YEC journals that are favorable to YEC type.
Yeah. So there's Creation Quarterly, which is run by CMI, which is the group that we're looking at here.
Okay.
There's the Answers Research Journal. There's the Proceedings of the what is it? There's the Proceedings of the something for creationism or something like that. There's a few. And what they all have in common is that in order to publish, your work has to agree with young earth creationism, which means anytime any scientist who might be a young earth creationist were to find findings that are a problem for young earth creationism, they'll just say, well, we won't publish that.
Yeah.
And now, okay, but that's the problem, right? Negative results are the most important results in many cases in science. You have to know about the negative results because you have to know what's wrong. And if you have a journal that does this, well, okay. And also, I mean, I've reviewed some of those papers that are published in these, and they're often atrocious. My go-to example is a paper by Gabriella Haynes, who is Answers in Genesis' sort of like pet paleontology person, because she did get a real degree in paleontology from a university in Brazil. I've read her dissertation. It's fine work. She identified insects based on I think it was beetles based on wing casings from some formation in Brazil, which okay, cool, that's fine. That's good work. But in this paper, it was very evident that she didn't know how to read a most basic, just family tree of dinosaurs. She couldn't interpret it at all. She got many anatomical terms for both dinosaurs and birds completely wrong, or in some cases just switched them entirely. And other creationists were also critical of this. And it's like, well, who peer reviewed this? The answer is no one. No one peer reviewed it because it's not a peer reviewed journal.
Okay.
So yeah, they have journals. They're really just blogs with strict formatting requirements for entries.
When an astronomer is looking up maybe at a distant galaxy and the light or the energy waves are coming back into his mass spectrometer, do the creation scientists and the evolutionary scientists, do they have the same or different facts and evidence to observe in the present?
Interesting thing there is light has a speed.
Yes.
And if you're looking at a distant galaxy from, say, 25 million light years away, then that's light had to travel 25 million years to get here. Now, the most common way that creationists get around this is they'll say, okay, God created the light in transit.
Yeah.
Okay. But also, we can watch things like supernovae in distant galaxies, which means that God encoded light from an explosion that never happened, from a star that never existed, to do what? To trick you? Because it's hard to come up with a different explanation other than, well, God's just playing a goof.
Yeah,
so to trick you into thinking that that's true.
So yeah, so if it's a supernova, that then after that we will receive no more light from it, right? Then that star never did exist. It's just the light that only ever existed. So there's a couple things I've heard. One goes back to the constants of the universe changing, which has all sorts of other problems. It doesn't solve much.
It actually creates more problems because the speed of light is fundamentally tied to huge numbers of constants. And if any of those changed, we could tell. Like
Maxwell's equations and the couple. There's two constants in there.
Yeah.
Or the other is, and as PhD Tony said, he stole my thunder. The one-way speed of light is an issue, but it's not a thing. Like.
Yeah, so that one is a weird one. It's mostly promoted by this by a Jason Lyle, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Who's mostly independent. He used to work for some of the big groups, but he's mostly cut ties with them. And there's a couple of problems. One is it is just geocentrism, really, but only for light, which is weird. So like Earth is the center of the universe for light rays, but not for anything else, and that's just automatically like that seems hard to justify. And the other thing is that Jason Lyle himself has proposed ways to do a proxy test for his idea, and so he said, well, my idea would suggest that very distant galaxies should look like modern galaxies that are close by. Right. So a galaxy at 14 billion light years away should look like a galaxy that we would expect to see in the local cluster. And they just don't. Like James Webb has shown that while they don't match all of our previous models of galaxy formation, and some things about galaxies happen faster than we thought after the Big Bang, they fundamentally do not look like the galaxies that we have in like the local area where light would be, coming at us from thousands or a few millions instead of billions of years, which means that his own proxy test for his idea has already gone against him. Now, he pretends it hasn't because he harps on the fact that older models of galaxy formations didn't match our observations perfectly. The problem is neither did his, and his predictions are far more off than those were. So, like, you don't get to count that as a win.
It's like Flatty's. It's like Flatty's saying you can't have 1 degree of refraction when they're relying on 180 degrees of refraction.
Right. Which actually, hey, just today is the equinox. It's the day where everyone sees the sun rise due east. Which, hey, Flatties, how are you gonna do that?
How does that work on your? There's no flat Earth model that works on. Yes. Because it rises due east and it sets due west. It's actually one of the things that I've used in a debate because if you take that and then you show, well, here's what it must do in order for that to happen. What has to happen is an entire line of longitude has to curve at sunrise so that it's all curving so that they all look east to the same sun, right? And then at sunset, it has to curve, but it has to curve the other direction.
Yeah.
Right? Right. So the entire Earth, as the sun moves past, right, the entire Earth has to morph over the course of just the number of hours that the sun is up in order for it to be due east and due west for sunrise and
You think
sunset.
there'd be a whole lot of earthquakes or something?
It's
All right.
well, magic does it.
I gotta show you this, which is nope, wrong one. Here we go. This is my South Pole centered flat Earth model that I made for when I debated Iron Horse or Flat Earth Aussie Jesus.
Oh my gosh!
Because he went first, and after he gave all of his alleged problems with the globe, I was like, you know what? You're right. The Earth isn't a globe, but I disagree with your model. This is my model. And so I started talking about like how this actually matches the observations that he gets in the Southern Hemisphere because, you know, he's in Australia and whatnot.
Yeah.
He got so angry and he started saying like, this is a farce. This is just a stupid idea. And I'm like, why is that? Why is it stupid? Tell me specifically what's stupid about this. Because of course, anything he says is going to apply just as much to his idea.
Yeah.
So that was, I had fun with that one.
That's great.
Okay. I'll hit play.
Let me ask you the question again. Who has the most evidence, evolution or creation?
Again, it depends on what you mean. If you mean who has the most available evidence, then it's equal. But if by that do you mean who actually takes into account the most evidence, it is by far the scientists. Because scientists generally try to get as much data as they can. Creationists tend to try to reject as much as they can. Because one of the things you'll notice is if you track the history of creationism, it's a history of them always being about 60 to 70 years behind science, but eventually kind of catching up where they can't reasonably keep people believing if they don't adapt.
So my wife and I were at the Perot Museum in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And we looked at this timeline that they had on the wall of different scientific like advancements, like figuring out that the Earth orbits the sun.
Big deal.
Yep. Figuring out that the Earth is a globe. And then into newer things. And we're looking at that when we're both saying, oh, look at that. These scientific advancements happened and the church just lagged behind it by whatever variable gap.
And actually, they didn't lag behind at all on the globe. There's no period where you can find like post-biblical Christian authors explicitly arguing for the globe that I've ever been able, explicitly arguing for a flat Earth that I've ever been able to find.
Yeah, until 160 years ago.
Well, okay, yeah.
175.
Yeah, until Robotham. And until then, yeah, there was never a like, oh, the Earth is totally flat group of Christians that I've ever found any evidence for.
Yeah.
Obviously, there were geocentrist Christians pretty much the whole way through. There still are. I mean, Robertson Genesis is out there tricking Kate Mulgrew into doing voiceover for him. I still can't believe he did that.
I know. What a dirtball.
All right, I'm going to play because we're not here to talk about Robertson Genesis, even though that would also be an interesting topic.
Okay, some of you guys are getting it, but I got deer in the headlights looks from some of you. So let's go ahead and do our own little experiment. Take a look at this fact, and here's
okay. I ask this question a lot because I never like the answer. What do you call the place where he's at in the church? That area? What is that to?
The stage.
Okay, I see. I hate that term, and it makes it feel like it's a concert, and that feels weird to me. But okay, I guess it's a stage.
But I mean, it's got a sound system. It's got lights.
Yeah,
it's got a drum set sitting up there, probably.
I'm just saying it makes me feel weird calling it a stage because I feel like inside of a church, there should be a churchier word. But okay,
what I don't know. Put a heavy metal band on there. Let's rock.
I mean, some churches do.
Yes,
there's some good Christian music out there.
Who's your favorite?
It's usually. Okay, so I'll be honest. I tend to only like I tend to most like Christian music that is at least 500 or more years old.
Okay, no, modern stuff.
Okay, well, see, then I have to go back to like, my early years of being having been adopted into human society after being a dinosaur.
Yeah.
But I did like DC Talk when I was a kid.
All right.
I did.
Oh, yeah.
They were fun.
I've seen them several times.
Nice. But yeah, my current tastes in Christian music are like, what is that? Some Gregorian chant? Yeah, let's put that on.
No, jeez.
Okay, here's something. If you have a headache, like especially if you have like a tension headache,
yeah,
put some Gregorian chant on in the background. It'll soothe it.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. Byzantine chant, I also like, but I find it less headache reducing.
I wonder if anybody in the chat can name a modern Christian band that they like. That's be a good question. All right, keep going.
All right.
Originally, we're going to make it easier. I'm going to make it multiple choice. How many people think it was A?
Okay, so this is what's missing from the shape.
Okay, how about B? C. I don't think there's one optimist in this crowd. Okay, how many people think it was D? All right, you want to know the answer?
Okay, so he's trying to draw this as a parallel to things like paleontology, but the problem is people didn't put that evidence into the ground, right? That's not what happened. He can say, I drew this shape like this and there's nothing missing because I drew it. But you can't say that about things like fossils or fossil lineages or transitional forms, because okay, I'm sure too you've seen like a medical skeleton in a classroom or something, right?
Yes.
If there was like a missing thoracic vertebra, you'd probably notice that there's a gap, and you'd probably be able to say, well, I think there's another vertebra that should be in this spinal column, and that's what should go in there, right? And if someone came up to you and said, no, I just made the skeleton that way, the proper response would be like, okay, well, you did it wrong because it's missing a vertebra. And that's the actual situation that we're in, right? Where we know there's supposed to be something in this gap, because that's how we determine that the world works. That's how anatomy works. That's how biology works. Yeah. You can't just say, well, what if it was drawn that way? What do you mean? You would have to give me an example of like a human who developed from like an embryo and didn't not just have a different number of vertebrae, because that happens, but actually had a gap in their spinal column where there's a vertebra just missing and now there's an empty space. Do you have that? No, of course not.
That wouldn't work very well either.
Exactly. You just kind of flop over, which maybe that's what happened to some of those flerfs. Maybe that's why they're such cowards in getting back to you about
they're missing stuff up there. That's where it is. Yeah.
Okay. The whole neocortex thing is lost on them.
We've got some feedback. We got some other DC Talk fans.
Okay.
Hillsong. Ugh.
Yeah, not my thing. Here's the thing about Hillsong. If you just play the music and you don't listen to the lyrics, it just sounds like a love ballad.
That's a hard pass. Hard pass for me. Jimmy Madison 42 says Petra, John Schlitt era. Did you know, Johnny Madison, every single song on the album Beyond Belief is actually about constipation? Beyond Relief, right? Though the winds may blow and though the floods may flow, I shall not be moved.
I really like the bit with where South Park decided to make the kids decided to make their own Christian album, and they literally just took love songs and replaced words like baby with Jesus.
Oh, gee, yeah.
And so they're just singing love songs, but they're like, I love you, Jesus. And it's like, oh, okay. And yeah, the thing is, it worked. It sounded like contemporary Christian worship music.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. MXPX.
Nice.
From the crowd.
Now, I want you to think about this before you respond, okay? And that is, why did you look for something missing? Because I told you to look for something missing. You see, what I did is I gave you what we call a presupposition. That's a long word that scientists use about an assumption that you would use when looking at the facts and evidence.
So this is another thing that creationists love to do. They love to talk about presuppositions or assumptions in science. But what they fail to realize is that generally, when a paper or something says, we assume this, what they then do is cite the reason that they assume that, because it's the conclusion of previous science.
Yeah, they're building on something else, yeah.
Right. So to like relate it to a flat earth idea, right? If you decide to say, calculate what you think should be the observable height of a building that's, say, 20 miles away under certain atmospheric conditions, you're going to assume the radius of the Earth. Why? Well, because other people already measured it. You don't need to go measure it again today to test the assumption. Or if you're going to build a bridge, you get to say, we're going to assume that the force of gravity is going to be 9.82 meters per second squared.
Yeah.
Why? Well, you didn't go out and test it yourself. You didn't have to. Someone else figured it out. It's fine. And that's but they harp on these. They'll say things like, well, they just assumed that the decay rate of potassium 40 or whatever is this. It's like, well, yes, this group of scientists assumed that because a different group measured it.
Yeah.
And so they hate that, though. The young Earth, apparently, the version of science they want is for you to have to start from scratch, from first principles, for every experiment.
Every time, yeah.
Yeah, which, just like when flerfs demand it, that's not how science works. There's nothing in the scientific method that says I have to do every single measurement that's at all relevant to my experiment. I can use previous measurements. And if you have a problem with the previous work that I'm relying on, it's on you to refute that work that my work relies on. Until then, my work stands. And if you disagree, that's great.
It's on you.
Do the work. Yeah. And do they ever do the work? No, they do not.
No, they just deny. And we're familiar with that over here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, congratulations that your conclusion was completely consistent with your presupposition, which was completely wrong. So, I tricked you, and that was actually my point. In fact, the next thing I'm going to say
I love that his point is, I was dishonest the whole time. Like, yep, you were.
is probably the most important thing I'm going to say that I would like you to remember, and that is that you're being tricked all the time. If you're watching a program...
And this is why I say, despite other people objecting, that young Earth creationism is a conspiracy theory. This guy is telling an entire church that they're being tricked by the scientists. The scientists are lying to them. The scientists know better. Or at the very least, they should know better. But they're tricking you anyway. And remember, his example for how they're tricking you involved him directly lying to the audience, drawing that parallel. He lied to you, and now I'm I lied for him. He's saying I lied to you, and in the same way I lied to you, the scientists are lying to you.
For example, on evolution, or maybe a textbook or a magazine article or what have you. I want to make sure you understand this, especially if there's students in the room. Listen, you are not being given facts. You're being given an interpretation of facts. That in the case of...
Sounds just like a flat earther.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's just the same thing. There's a reason why I say that flat Earth is just like the young Earth. And it's not technically true, right? Like I said, it's easier to figure out the globe Earth than it is to figure out the age of the Earth, obviously. But the rhetoric, the conspiracy, the don't trust the scientists, trust me. I know what's right.
Yeah, and
the same.
The biblical flat earthers and the young Earth creationists have a similar process. They look at the Bible and they take an interpretation of it that isn't necessarily right? Other people disagree. Whose is right? Well, you can't say, I'm just taking the inerrant Bible, because people that think that the Bible is inerrant translate or interpret the very same passage with different ways. Who is correct in which is the correct inerrant version? They don't agree. There is no version of the Bible that is the inerrant version. So anyway, that's the process that they use. You got to go the other way. Let's look at reality. And then does the holy book match the reality? Well, if it doesn't, that's a problem for the holy book. You got it the wrong direction.
Yeah, it's either a problem for the holy book or your interpretation of it.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to fix one of those. If you can't find an interpretation that works with your holy book, well, then it's wrong. And if you can, okay, fine, have fun with that. As long as you're not hurting other people and you're not denying science, I don't really care. You can have whatever interpretation within that bounds that you want, and I'm not going to say anything about it. Although here's a fun one. So, Genesis is where a lot of this stuff comes from.
The band
the book
with Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins.
No, the book Genesis, which is in Hebrew titled Breshit.
And what is it in Klingon?
There isn't a particular word for that. You'd probably just transliterate either Breshit or Genesis.
All right.
But it's in Hebrew. And one of the fun things is creationists getting Hebrew badly wrong. My favorite one is they like to display Torah scrolls turn to Genesis, which is basically just the first panel in a Torah scroll, because it's the first book in the Torah. But they flip it 180 degrees so that it looks like it starts left justified, because they don't know enough about Hebrew to know that it's supposed to start on the other side, the right side, and read to the left. They're like, well, it looks right if I have it reading left to right so that all the lines start the same line on the left. But yet you've just turned the Torah scroll 180 degrees upside down. That's just not how Hebrew works, guys. It's just like, this is your favorite book. You don't even know which direction it reads in? Come on. Like come on. All right. It's not even a big thing. It's just like, guys, get the direction of Hebrew right. It's the first thing you learn when you go to study Hebrew. Is like, hey, guys, we're going to read from right to left. That's the first thing you learn.
Yep.
Of evolution has some huge scientific problems, and we need to be like the Bereans. Do you guys remember them in the Bible? They wanted to know what the facts and what the truth were. So shouldn't we also be digging and finding out, especially in this very important issue we should be doing?
And here's the thing, I'm fine with that, right? But if you're going to ignore data, which is something they demonstrably do, then you're not trying to find the truth. You're trying to figure out whichever interpretation feels nice to you, makes you feel warm and fuzzy.
Yeah.
But warm and fuzzy feelings do not correlate with reality. In fact, this is, I don't want to get too religion-y minded, but I remember once being told by some Mormon missionaries, like, you should ask God in your heart if the Book of Mormon is true. And it's like, if I ask in my heart if this letter I got from an insurance company is the word of God, and I sincerely think it might be, and I really hope it is, I'm going to get a warm fuzzy feeling, right? And then this letter from an insurance company is be like, oh, hey, this God wants me to pay my insurance bill. That's the word of God.
Well, pay your insurance bill either way.
Well, I did pay the insurance bill.
That's good. That's good. And Slarty Bartfast thinks that Gabriel Genesis was better than Colin's Genesis, and I know it's like pineapple and pizza. Colin's for me.
I like the expanded fan fiction from Enoch, First Enoch. That's always fun.
That is good stuff.
Yeah, Watchers and the flat Earth, the sun going through portals and all sorts of nuts, crazy stuff. It's lots of fun. And hey, you know what? It's in the Ethiopian Bible.
Therefore, it's true. It's canon.
I mean, it is canon for the Ethiopian Tewahedo Orthodox Church. So, I mean,
the same. Historic science is like that television show CSI, and I don't know if Pastor Phil allows you to watch such programs.
Hey, fun fact. One of the signs that you're in a cult is if the organization controls what media you consume.
I think, all right, give him the benefit there. I think he's kidding. I hope he's kidding.
Okay,
Please
I'm just saying,
kidding.
if your pastor starts telling you what shows to watch, you might want to change churches.
There are churches that do that for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I know. I've been in plenty of churches. In fact, I was once in a choir in a church. So, well, I was a choir boy. Or choir dinosaur? I don't know. We sang about a third of the time in Arabic. That was fun.
What?
Yeah, it was an Arab church.
Really? Oh,
yeah, right. I was one of the only non-Arabs there.
Oh, okay.
I only do so for research purposes myself, but in case you haven't seen some of those crime dramas, there are scientists that are digging up facts and evidence of a crime that happened in the past, and the facts and evidence.
And remember, if he's going to be consistent, he has to say, and we can't draw firm conclusions from that. Right? Because if we can draw firm conclusions about the past from forensics, we can do it from paleontology and geology too.
Yeah.
The physical evidence are brought into the courtroom and presented to the jury via two opposing attorneys. Same facts, same evidence. While one attorney is saying, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've seen the facts and evidence in this case. Obviously, you can tell just by seeing these facts that my client is innocent. And this one's going to say, whoa, ladies and gentlemen, obviously the facts point to his guilt. You can clearly.
And see, here's the problem. Lawyers are assigned their conclusion from the outset. If you're the defense lawyer and your client says, no, we want to fight this, you have to find the interpretations that says he's not guilty. And if you're the prosecuting attorney, and you've been handed this case, it's your job to say that he's guilty. And you don't actually, prosecutors can and do say, well, actually the evidence doesn't support this, so we'd like drop this charge. So he's wrong about the fact that like prosecutors have to say that they're guilty. But if we just go with it, right, it's your job to prove that this guy, beyond any reasonable doubt, is guilty. But the actual evidence does not support an infinite variety of conclusions.
Yeah.
It might support more than one conclusion. Like you might have some ambiguity, but fundamentally, the forensic evidence will support a subsection of the infinite field of possibilities that could have been the case in the past. And there's a reason that juries can notice this and come to correct decisions that are not overturned. Most convictions are generally correct, right? Sure, some it's imperfect, just like science is, right?
Hopefully, yeah. That's the point of the whole system. It's built around that, is right, to shuffle out the stuff that isn't correct, and it's not it's not perfect, but.
And further, though, scientists are not in the position where they have their conclusions assigned at the outset.
No.
Toon, you promised that you would close down your channel and make an apology video saying the Earth is flat if you didn't see the 24-hour sun.
I did.
That's because you're doing something that's open to the evidence. You're saying, yeah, if the evidence doesn't support my conclusion, then my conclusion is wrong. Yeah. And that's right. Like, look, if you had gone and said, no, it's nighttime, and you'd live stream from Antarctica and it was night, I would have also said, well, that's a big problem for the globe. And I don't know what the correct shape and map of the Earth is, but it sure isn't whatever that globe is that I have on the shelf back there, which is totally on this Star Trek bridge set that I have. This is real. This isn't a fake green screen. I'm really on the bridge. Don't worry about it.
See this, and this one's going, no, he's misinterpreting the facts, and this one's going, no, he's misinterpreting. But folks, same facts, same evidence, two different and opposing interpretations.
Yes, but only one of them is likely to be actually concordant with the evidence. One of them will have problems that makes it wrong.
Well, one or neither.
Well, yeah,
yeah,
but that's the problem. He's making this really bad analogy. And I think actually creationists sometimes make analogies that are really poor on purpose because they are full of really bad analogies. And this is one of them. Science does not operate like a courtroom. Science doesn't operate by two scientists having someone hand them a case and say, you're going to argue that aerogel is in fact a good way to insulate spaceships, and you're going to argue that it isn't. And here are some experiments that we've done. Look at the data and argue with each other. And then this panel of 12 people from the community are going to figure out whether or not we should insulate spaceships with aerogel. That's not what happens. Scientists go in, they do tests, they gather data. Other scientists look at that. They try to see if they can reproduce those tests. If they can and they support the original conclusion, then that conclusion starts to become the accepted conclusion because it has the evidence. Yeah. It does not at all work like a courtroom.
And it's up to the jury to decide which one makes the most sense.
And see, for him, he wants his audience to be the jury. But there's another problem. They're fundamentally not equipped to actually come up right now, at least at this point in their lives, likely, with well-informed opinions on this, right? Because they don't have the background information. Like if I said, hey, Toon, what do you think about the controversy over the extent of soft tissue covering of dentition of Cretaceous theropods?
I think that RFC 5321 should not have had an A record fallback that was outdated at the time.
See? But does that mean that the scientists who both know what that means and know what the evidence is don't have anything to say? No. You shouldn't be the jury for that discussion. And that's not a problem for you. That's not an indictment. Most people shouldn't be involved in that discussion. But that doesn't change the fact that the scientists are doing real science that comes to real conclusions that are well supported by real evidence.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, right? If you want to become someone who can have an opinion that's informed about these topics, you can. But it takes a lot of work, and most people won't do it. And that's fine. Most of our lives, most of us aren't experts in everything, right? If a car breaks down, most of us go to the mechanic. Some of us know enough about cars to figure it out. But that's not most of us. Most of us, if we break a limb or something, we're going to go to the doctor. Some of us are doctors and maybe could fix that on their own. They usually don't, but maybe you could. But that's still never going to be most of us. And it's the same thing with this. You should not be telling a church, you guys can come up with all your conclusions about science, because they fundamentally can't. And he is, instead of informing them about the science, he is misinforming them about the science so that they are even less well equipped.
However, in this case, in the creation and evolution debate, most people in our culture have only been told one side of the story.
Just like they always display the Earth as a globe in the movies, and they only teach the globe in classrooms. Yeah, that's because one side of
there's
this
a reason.
Yeah,
Why?
has evidence.
Why are there so many globes around? Because that's what it is. It's correct.
Yeah, it's just like if the Earth were flat, then the Earth would be full of little flat Earth miniaturized.
Yeah, we'd have all the frisbees would have a map on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Or is it even a map if it's just shrunk down? It's just a scale representation.
Yeah.
Because if the Earth were flat, you wouldn't need to distort it. You wouldn't need projections. You're just like, okay, just 1-to-1 scale. Well, I mean, a scale bar, right? Like every inch is this many miles or kilometers or whatever, sheep units. I don't know.
Icy Spin got my reference.
Nice.
Candace Taylor.
And they didn't come to church today, and I kind of don't blame them. But here's...
Not being a young Earth creationist is in no way an indication of your church-going habits. I went to a young Earth creationist church as a non-young Earth creationist for years, and I've gone to many churches that were not young Earth creationist churches. I have attended many churches over the various years. I don't go into my current religious affiliation because it doesn't really matter, but it is absolutely not the case that people who are not young Earth creationists therefore do not go to church. They might not go to this guy's church or whatever this, because it's obviously not, it's not his church. He's visiting.
Yeah.
But they might not go to this church. Sure, maybe. But they do go to church.
The thing, when it comes to your family and your neighbors, maybe your coworkers, even your own children and grandchildren, who is going to tell them the other side?
Charlatans is the answer.
The other side.
All right,
yeah.
we're going to take a look at a little bit of evidence that makes sense of the historical account of the Bible. And I'm going to start out with an icon of millions of years of time in scientific terms, and that is the Grand Canyon, which gives me an excellent opportunity to slip in a family vacation shot. But if you were to go to the Grand Canyon today, you would, of course, be told it took millions of years for those layers to be laid down.
Okay, so that's because it did, right? So if you look here, what you can see are a number of different rock formations. At the very bottom of the canyon, we have the basement rocks, which are mostly things like granites and other igneous and metamorphic rocks, like schists and things like this, right? But as you go up, you start getting to things like the Bright Angel Shale. And the thing is about shale is you can deposit shale quickly, but if it does, then it has to clump together into what are called floccules. And then the floccule actually comes out. So Brownian motion is basically what determines how fast sediments can fall out of the water in many cases. So if you've ever dropped a little bit of sand in a glass, and as you watch, the sand doesn't just fall straight down like it would in air, right? It kind of does one of these things where it just moves around a little bit as it goes down. What's moving it is actually the fairly random bouncing around of water molecules. And you can't stop this unless you freeze the water. But if you freeze the water, well, particulates aren't going anywhere. But the bigger and heavier particulates are, generally, the easier it is for them to overcome the force of Brownian motion, and then gravity is the dominant force. But if the relative strength of gravity versus Brownian motion is there's a small difference, then that particle will be almost as likely to be shot up by a water molecule bumping it as it is to go down. It'll be slightly biased towards down because the force of gravity is non-random, whereas Brownian motion is random. So it will eventually settle out, right? Which means, though, we can calculate how long it takes for different things to settle out. And for shale that doesn't form these floccules, which can settle out faster, it's a slow process. It can't be very fast. Otherwise, it won't deposit shale. And we have thick layers of shale towards the bottom. Similarly, limestone, like we've already talked about, there's a big, I don't know, does my mouse show up on the stream if I put my mouse over here?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, so over here we have this thing called the red wall limestone. It's called that because it looks like a wall, and it's red, and it's made of limestone. Whoever named it was very, very descriptive. That's that thing that I was talking about, where we have like 100 or so meters of just solid limestone, which is even finer than the shale. Further, we have what's called Aeolian sandstone down a little, actually it's up a little bit. It's in the Coconino sandstone. The Coconino sandstone is an ancient desert, and we can tell because it has preserved dunes, and it actually, in certain levels, has preserved raindrops. When rain hits the top of a
raindrops?
floodwater, yeah, preserved raindrops.
How? That's crazy.
It rains, water hits the sand, that dries out, and then it actually lithifies before more sand is deposited on top of it.
What's lithify?
Turn into rock.
So it was dry long enough for it to...
Mm-hmm.
Wow. All right.
Yeah. And the thing is, if raindrops hit the top of floodwaters, you don't get raindrops on the sand underneath the floodwaters. It just merges with the floodwater.
Yeah.
So in order for a raindrop to be preserved, it has to hit the top of the surface with no standing water. And we have preserved raindrops in the same formation with amphibian tracks and desert-like dunes. We know this wasn't formed underwater. And then also, we know from things like radiometric dating and stratigraphy that even with just stratigraphy, our best bet for this is going to be hundreds of thousands of years. And with the radiometric dating, we know that it's actually over the course of tens of millions of years. So even if we ignore the radiometric dating because they don't like it, it doesn't matter. You physically cannot form this much rock in a single flood in a year, which is what they think has happened.
So, yeah, there's multiple lines of evidence here that agree. But is it that they think it was multiple, that it was formed over the course of the flood, or that it was eroded over the course of the flood?
The general young Earth creationist position on the Grand Canyon is that the rocks formed during the flood, and then as the floodwaters receded, the runoff carved the canyon through the rocks that formed in the flood.
Oh my goodness.
And there's another problem with that, which is that, one, we know that rocks have to lithify, and that takes time. Yeah. Because what the process of lithification is basically when sediment is deposited, there's a bunch of water between the sediments, and they're not closely packed together. But over time, as more sediment falls on it, the sediments squeeze together, they squeeze out water, and what stays behind are the particulates and any cementing agent that might be in there, like calcite or something, right? There's different, aragonite is another, there's a whole bunch of cementing agents. And so that over time can lithify it. But in order for this to form from flood runoff, that means it would have had to lithify under the floodwaters. But we don't have enough time or enough pressure to do that. And if the flood had formed in an unlithified sequence of sediments, instead of having this crazy, see all these crazy jagged edges and sharp walls, and there's these little things called dendritic canyons that branch off like tree branches. That's what a dendrite is, it's a tree branch. Floodwaters don't do that when they carve out a channel. We know because we can see regular normal sized floods here on Earth right now, but also we actually have preserved for us actual examples of basically biblical proportion floods, both here and on Mars, which is fun. But here, if you go to the channeled scablands in Washington, that's an area where a gigantic glacial lake broke open several times actually and flooded over basically the entire area of like southern Washington and northern Oregon, just a massive flood that nothing could possibly survive. And there are ripple marks in the rocks that are miles across. They're gigantic. But the thing is that the channel scablands have giant ripples, and they have smooth-sided walls because that's what floods do. And they don't have little dendrites because fast-flowing water doesn't like to make U-turns.
Yes.
And the canyon has full of that kind of stuff. So it just doesn't work. I'm sorry, guys, but you physically can't form the canyon from flood runoff. Now, there is one thing, which is to say that it is a well-supported hypothesis that the initial incision that became the Grand Canyon may have actually happened as a result of a flood that started with a lake draining. Basically, an earthen dam that was natural broke. And the initial incision was from that. But that can't explain all of the other features. That basically just establishes the initial flow of the Colorado River, and that becomes a drainage area because of that initial erosion. So there is that. So if someone says, well, what about this paper that says that it started from draining of Lake Missoula? That's what that is. Because that is one of those things they'll throw at you. If they're the the more sophisticated creationists, shall we say, who have heard of things like Lake Missoula, which is not all of them.
Slowly, and millions of years for them to turn to rock and slowly be eroded. And indeed, when we look at the process of sedimentation, when we do look at the facts, what happens today in the present is it is a very slow process. That's what we see, those layers forming slowly. So, if what we observe in the present is what's always happened in the past, then I would grant you it had to have taken millions of years.
And see, notice how he words that.
Yeah.
It's this what always happened. But the claim isn't that everything that happens now is exactly what happened in the past, because we know that's not true.
Yeah.
Things were different in the past. But what is the case is that physics is the same. And I've noticed I'm fuzzy again. Sorry about that. I'll try to fix that. And the claim that this could not have been from a young formation isn't that geological processes have to be the same now as they always were. It's that the physics that govern geological processes are the same now as they were in the past. And until you can come up with new physics, you don't get to propose things that are currently physically impossible. So the claim is not, well, shale deposits the exact same rate now as it always has. No. The claim is the maximum deposition rate of shale is governed by the laws of physics. And if you want to exceed what we know to be possible, you need to provide evidence. And the thing is, sedimentology is a thing. Like, you can do experiments in sedimentology. Creationists, go get a sedimentology tank and do experiments. Want to know how many creationists I know that have a sedimentology tank?
None?
None. It's none. They can afford to make a multi-million-dollar replica of a giant wooden boat that's actually just a building in the back because, it's mostly made of concrete and they have to have modern HVAC units in the arc. Otherwise, people can't breathe. They can afford to do that. But get some plexiglass and some dirt? No. Beyond the pale. Can't do it.
However, did you know that the evidence is overwhelming that these massive layers were laid down by water?
Well, most of them, that's true.
Overwhelming.
That is true for most of them. But it's significantly not true for the Coconino sandstone, like we already discussed, which is a bit of a problem. Because the Coconino sandstone, it's closer to the top than it is to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, but it's not at the very top, which is the only place where you could get wind-blown sand to deposit under a flood. And so was there a pause in the flood where the entirety of this area of North America dried out, turned into a desert, and then dry sand was blown in? I guess that would have to be that. I don't know how that translates into a worldwide flood that's depositing all this sediment everywhere else. And it's not the only place where we have sand like this. It's one of the older places, but we also have rocks in what they call flood rocks that are just like this, right? I don't know if you're familiar with the fighting dinosaurs. There's a Protoceratops and a Velociraptor, and the Velociraptor has its claw at the Protoceratops' throat, and the Protoceratops has its beak clamped around the arm of the Velociraptor.
Yeah, I saw that. It was at an underground dinosaur fight in LA, but don't tell anybody that I was there because it was illegal.
Okay. But yeah, it's a fairly famous fossil, and it's found in another Aeolian sandstone deposit that's in Mongolia. And what happened is that these two animals were fighting, and a dune collapse happened, and they got buried in the dune. And it's a desert dune, and we can tell because the angle at which the sand sits in air versus underwater dunes is characteristically different.
Oh yeah.
And because that's preserved in the rocks, we can just measure the angle. You just take a protractor, and you can say, okay, this was in a desert. Or, okay, this was underwater. You just need a protractor. Or an angleometer, I'm sorry. Don't want to confuse the flerfs.
Good, I'm glad you got it right. I was going to correct you.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, all you need is an angleometer. I guess a sextant could work. It would be really inconvenient. Like trying to get up to the edge of the rock and that would be a pain. But you could make it work.
And where do we find massive layers like this? I mean, the Grand Canyon, to be sure, but did you know that no matter where we go on this planet and we start digging into the sediment, we're going to find massive and deep layers? And guess what?
That is incorrect. Go try that in Hawaii. It won't work. It's true for a lot of places, but it's not true for everywhere.
I don't know how this is helping him, though.
It's not.
Okay.
The argument is just like this. Most sedimentary rock is deposited by water. You know what a flood's made of? Water.
Therefore,
deposited in
all
the flood.
sedimentary. Yeah, there's a little
all
bit of
the
a.
most recent.
Uh,
Usually they'll say like the very most top layers are actually post flood, but like whatever.
it's if
It's
P
almost
then
all.
Q, therefore P. That's
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing.
And it's not the problem is it's if P therefore Q, and they say it's Q, but it's not even Q. It's actually not Q. But they're just pretending it is anyway.
Let's pretend it's Q for a second. It still doesn't work.
Right.
That's what we find inside those layers. Fossils. So,
Again, in some of them, yeah.
can you think of any historical event in the Bible that might explain massive sedimentary layers laid down by water covering the entire planet, including the evidence of dead things? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, obviously it's the flood, but the problem is, notice how vague he's keeping it. What could explain water deposited sediments? It's like, well, okay, yeah, a flood could, but can it explain the specific sediments that we have?
Yeah.
And the answer is no, right? Because while floods do deposit large amounts of sediment, they tend to do it in very characteristic ways. So, for instance, it's always what's going to be called turbidite, which is just rock from turbidity. Okay, thanks, geologists. Geology's like that. But like the characteristics that are there, you can detect them, right? Like for one thing, it tends to be a mix of different grain sizes because floods tend to sweep away larger rocks that are normally caught up in just the everyday deposition. And so what you expect to see generally in flood deposits are first you expect to see indications of large scale water flow in the region, right? So you expect big ripple marks, smooth-sided canyon walls, even in paleo canyons, because yes, we have preserved paleo canyons. There's actually one in the Grand Canyon. It's called Surprise Canyon. There's a canyon in the Grand Canyon that's actually an ancient fossilized canyon that the Grand Canyon has cut through. It's so cool. So if you were to go back millions of years ago, there would have been a different canyon going in a different direction than the Grand Canyon that would later get cut through to make the Grand Canyon, which is just mind-blowing to me. I love that. But anyway.
The only cool thing I know about the Grand Canyon is that I cut a whiz off the edge.
I mean, that is cool.
I did. I'm not kidding.
South edge or the north edge, though?
South.
Okay, yeah, that's where everyone goes. Got to go to the north edge for the real experience.
The real cutting a whiz off experience?
It is higher there, if I remember correctly. I think the south edge is actually a little higher. Although I might be wrong. It might be the other way around. Anyway, so the thing is that we know that that's not the case for all the waterborne sediments that we have. It doesn't work. If all of the sediments were consistent with a flood, then sure, this might be a good argument, but almost none of them are. In fact, creationists don't even talk about the actual flood sediments that we have all that often. They do occasionally, like there's one in the Two Medicine Formation that famously has a bunch of Myosaura in it, and they'll talk about that. There's another one in the Lance Formation that I actually have cited a few times, the creationist paper on this bone bed from a flood in the Lance Formation. So it does happen here and there, but it's not characteristic of most of the sedimentary rock. But it should be the only thing we find is flood sediment, but it's almost never what we find.
Yeah.
I had a man come up to me when I was talking about the flood, and he said, "You've got to be kidding. You guys claim to be scientists."
This is a conversation that I don't think actually happened the way he's describing it. Just going to say that.
And yet your Bible says that the highest mountains in the world were covered by water, and there's not enough water to do that.
So that is true. There is not enough water to cover, say, Mount Everest.
Gotcha. So how do you answer a question like that? I get excited. I could show them this, for example. And you may remember from junior high school that 70% of this planet is covered by incredibly, unbelievably deep oceans. In fact, did you know that?
Okay, but one big thing, the oceans don't have enough water to cover the high mountains. And you know how I know? Because they're not covering the high mountains.
Yeah, right now. Yeah.
Right.
This, that if you were able to take all the continents and mountains and push them down and raise the ocean basins up and reform our planet like a perfect...
Right, if the Earth wasn't like the Earth, then the flood is plausible. Problem solved, man.
Yeah. I don't get where the water went. Doesn't.
So the idea is basically that before the flood, and they say this for no other reason than to excuse away this
that
problem.
There were no mountains?
Well, that the total relief was lower. Basically, ocean trenches weren't as deep, mountains weren't as high.
Yeah, okay.
But the problem is that we have Paleo-mountains, and we know how orogenies work. Orogenies are just mountain-forming events. And we can combine that information to tell us how tall, roughly, Paleo-mountains were. It turns out that if you live in North America, Africa, or, well, like Northwest Africa, or Scotland, your backyard has evidence of mountains much taller than the Himalayas are now. It was the central Pangean mountain chain, and it's what's left of it now is the Appalachian Mountains in North America, the Atlas Mountains in Africa, and the Scottish Highlands. Those are actually all one mountain chain from Pangaea. And the folding and what we have evident from things like, we could see the fold in the rock that make up these mountains. We know that they lasted longer and therefore would almost certainly be much, much taller than the Himalayas in the ancient past. So we have evidence of mountains too tall for this. So when he's like, well, what if the Earth just was more like a cue ball? Which, by the way, the Earth is actually much smaller than any cue ball you've ever encountered in real life. Like, the actual surface relief on Earth is minuscule. But if it was even smaller, okay, but we know it wasn't. So what are we doing here? You're just making this up.
Yeah,
that we know it's not true.
I mean, it's okay to make a hypothesis,
right?
But there's a whole bunch of hypotheses to support this other hypotheses, but you've got this whole chain of them that haven't been tested and found to be true. So they're
some parts of the chain have been tested and already falsified.
True, but so what you're making there's a goat rope, right? It's a rope that's been cut and tied together and frayed and cut and tied together. A different rope that you pieced in. That's the goat rope from one end to the other, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, that kind of rope is only as strong as its weakest bit of rope or weakest knot, and you've already got some knots that are already come undone.
Yeah,
it's not a good idea. And I was in the Navy, so I know about ropes.
Oh, you know about knots?
No, I never tied any knots when I was in the Navy. I was down in the bowels of the engine room the entire time.
Oh.
We didn't have much rope.
What kind of ship?
Aircraft carrier.
Oh, sweet. Which one?
Yeah, the Stennis.
One of the good ones.
If you say so. I didn't enjoy it much.
I have no idea.
Yes, USS John C. Stennis, CVN 74, if you want to look it up.
All right.
Named after a famous segregationist who also passed a bill that increased funding to the Navy. So we got an aircraft carrier named after him.
That's all you got to do?
Apparently, yeah. Also be good buddies with Reagan.
Oh.
Yeah.
If I say that I want to pass a bill to fund an aircraft carrier, can I name it after me?
I think you actually have to be a senator or something like that.
Crap. That's a lot of work. Ugh.
Yeah, but it's possible. You could do it. Also, I think it has to be posthumous or something.
Possums?
Posthumous.
Yeah, you're saying it wrong. It's possums.
Oh, okay. My apologies. Hey, the only native North American marsupial, the opossum.
Beard, just like a basketball.
Hold on. We're there. I'm looking at how far we are. There's zero chance we're gonna make it through.
That's true.
And
that's true.
We got some audience participation that wants to be noted.
Oh yes, let's do. Oh, I should shut this down. I'm sorry.
All right.
Here we go.
All right, we've got Dr. Tapioca Weasel twice sent 5 memberships as a total of 7.
I think he did some flerf math there.
Something like that. It was Terrence Howard math. And
Teriology.
Fade to Gray, which in parentheses says Queen of Supernatural Geology. Are you familiar with
so a lot of the people with the parenthetical names, those are inside jokes from my channel, and this has to do with Darwin's misconceptions about how heritability worked.
If you say so. He says, anyway, Fate to Gray says, YECs also love their Trojan sources.
They do. The king of the Trojan sources for Yex is, what's his name? Randy Galuza of the Institute for Creation Research.
So what's a Trojan source?
A Trojan source is when the source not only fails to support the argument, but also actively contradicts it. So basically every flerf source ever.
It's the first law of flerf.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Creationists are actually better at sources because most of the time when they cite a source, it just doesn't support them, but it doesn't directly contradict. Which is an improvement.
Yeah, and flerf ones directly contradict. Yeah, okay, I get it.
Time.
Yeah. And then Dr. Tapioca Weasel gifted another 5 memberships, so that's 37.
Nice. Well done.
Very good. Thank you. Then comes in and says with the $10 super chat, so I, and chat in parentheses, so that's an inside joke, learned from South Park that the best Christian rock band is Faith Plus One.
Yeah.
I learned from YouTube that Faith Plus 1 equals 1 equals whatever you want.
Thanks, Terrence Howard.
And then the next super chat is, and by YouTube I mean Terrence Howard.
Oh man,
I can't believe it. He's so dumb. Icy Spin says, show us your flat vid that you made, please.
Oh, that was probably this one.
There you go.
Yep.
With Antarctica in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Flat Earth Ozzy was really angry that the sun was going counterclockwise.
But that's
it's going the wrong way.
That's observations. That's what you see in Australia.
I know. I tried to tell him that several times.
He's too stupid to know that that's reality.
It's amazing.
Oh my gosh. Jimmy Madison 42 says, what's the opinion on irreducible complexity? Say a biomotor in a bacteria with missing pole pieces, rendering it immobile, with 1/8 of its mass being useless, as those parts haven't mutated yet. That's what I was thinking.
Okay, so irreducible complexity is an argument that was mostly put forth by Michael Behe. It's largely based on the Paley's watch argument from William Paley, whose argument was basically, if you find a watch on the beach, you know, because of its intricate design and interlocking parts, that it couldn't have been simply the production of like the action of the waves on the sand. It had to be a purposeful design. Okay. So Behe updates this for the modern day back in the 90s. With his book Darwin's Black Box, and he says that a irreducibly complex system in biology is one with a multitude of, or just a numerous number of interacting parts, such that the removal or significant change of any one part will cause the system to cease functioning. And then he says that there is no stepwise manner to evolve such systems, and he's not clear like what a system is. Like, can it be a single protein? Does it have to be like numerous organs, a single anatomical feature, a metabolic path? He's not clear about that, right? But he does use like the mammal blood clotting cascade as an example, the bacterial flagellum as an example, and the eye as an example, if I remember correctly. Okay, so the answer to this is we've seen irreducibly complex systems evolve in real time in both nature and the lab. The major HIV group that infects humans, HIV group 1, has an irreducibly complex protein that in the human infecting version of HIV, because HIV is evolved from the SIV virus, the simian immunovirus, which circulates in chimpanzees. The HIV virus actually in historical times evolved a new irreducibly complex protein that antagonizes a human immune protein called tetherin. And so this protein that in all other versions of HIV, which are less common in humans, as well as in all versions of SIV, this protein has a completely different function. But in HIV group 1, that protein has 4 interacting parts which latch on to tetherin from outside the cell membrane and prevent it from interfering with the virus in the cell, which is one of the reasons why that group of HIV viruses can infect humans. Similarly, in the Lenski long-term experiment, a irreducibly complex metabolic pathway evolved that allowed those bacteria to digest citrate in the presence of oxygen. Oh, I'm sorry.
Something auto started on me here.
Oh, weird. So the answer to this is basically we've seen irreducibly complex things evolve. And there are stacks of papers about the specific evolution of the bacterial flagellum. It has to do with things like, I think it's like the type 2 secretory system, which is still used by bacteria for secretions. If you've ever had an E. coli infection, those E. coli bacteria were using their type 2 secretory systems to inject your cells with toxins. So there's that. And so the only refuge that irreducible complexity has left is, okay, well, maybe some irreducibly complex systems can evolve, but others probably can't. At which point I say, okay, well, it's on you to find one that can't. And the fact that you don't know how it did evolve doesn't mean it can't. And you can't just use its irreducible complexity to say that it can't, because we already know that that's not a barrier on its own. So, hey, good luck finding a system that you can demonstrate couldn't evolve. It's on you now.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, Toon. I know that all of this is outside your wheelhouse.
No kidding. Man, I don't do soft sciences like biology.
What about geology? That's a hard science, right? It's full of rocks. It's harder than rocks.
Yeah, it's
rocks are hard,
man.
It's
physics. Anything softer than physics is just a soft science, really.
Well, we talked about Brownian motion and lithification. That's physics.
Well, Brownian motion is physics. Yeah, that's all good. But you were talking about this. Whatever you were saying that I can't even begin to repeat. The Sun Express says gypsum crystal growth rates are known with exquisite detail. The Nika crystal caves on all on their own, totally undermine any YEC age assertions.
I mean, look, I don't even know about those caves, but the thing is, if you have an area that you're knowledgeable in, that's scientific, there's an almost 100% chance that you can refute something that disproves some claim of young Earth creationism, and thereby basically falsify young Earth creationism. Young Earth creationism violates fundamental aspects of physics, geology, biology, astronomy, relativity. It violates fundamental aspects of nuclear physics, quantum physics. All of these things would have to be wrong for young Earth creationism to become even close to plausible.
Yeah. Eric Burns says, I have so many students that thought astronomy was going to be an easy science. Turns out the only thing you ever do is look through a telescope. It's super easy. Am I right?
I actually took an astronomy class for one of my science electives, and a lot of people took it thinking like, oh, this is no big deal. And then it's like, hey, here's a chart of the spectrum of a star. Give me its temperature and mass and distance. And like all these students were like, oh no, what am I going to do with this? It's like, yeah, it turns out astronomy, like all sciences, is actually really technical and not easy.
Yeah. Who'd have thought?
And I never looked through a single telescope the entire class.
Then you didn't do astronomy. What are you talking about? Jack Vetter says, I love the sarcasm he applies to scientific terms. I think he's talking about the guy in the video there.
Oh, yeah. Although sometimes I do too, when I'm like, the red wall limestone, it looks like that because it's red and it's a wall and it's made of limestone.
Tiles says, Will Duffy states his position on what you see on the Line call-in show episode, Sunday show 9/8/24, if anyone is interested. And then he has been on, just for reference, somebody else mentioned he has been on Culture Cats recently, or 8 out of 10 Cats, a couple times, and he went over it there as well.
Mm-hmm.
PJ Tony says, Will Duffy and I will be having a conversation on the age of the Earth on Culture Cats in about a week.
Nice. I listened to PhD Tony's talk with Peter Markley on the same topic, and I thought that was really good.
Yeah, I like them both. They're both great.
Yeah, I've had a similar conversation with Peter Markley over on Craig's channel. And I mean, look, Peter and I disagree, but Peter seems like a cool dude. Whatever. I'm not going to sit here and say that every young Earth creationist is a vile person, like it's generally true for flat earthers. It's not generally true.
Yeah.
Although it is sometimes true. I remember one time being asked by a young Earth creationist how I managed to get so many women to come on my channel. And I was having trouble coming up with something that didn't just come out to, well, don't be a sexist dick. Because that was his problem with getting women on his channel.
And obviously you get the women on your channel because you're a linguist.
I've even known to be cunning.
Dapper, did you ever sink any battleships?
No, there basically are no more battleships that are actually in operation. So
Because he sank them all.
Yes, I used my mighty dinosaur jaws to sink all the battleships, and now there aren't any.
Dr. Tapia Louisa says, what's the link to the source video? I can make a live bingo game like we, especially Fearmonger, do for Dapper streams.
I don't have it handy right now, but if you message me on Discord, I can get that to you.
Yeah. We're going to have to wrap it up. We're 3 hours in. And
13 minutes.
And almost, yeah. And we're halfway through.
No, we're more than halfway because we only have 9 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Steve from Wormhaven says gifted 20 memberships. Let me add them up. That's 53.
Man, Terry is really expanding your channel. It's very nice.
Terrence Howard is so good at math. Jack Vetter says F the aircraft carrier because of global recession and you can get your bust on Mount Rushmore. You might need to invade Greenland too.
I have no current plans to invade Greenland.
I mean, if somebody wanted to invade Greenland, I don't think it would be much of a fight that was put up.
Well, so recently, a number of countries, including a few nuclear countries, have pledged to defend Greenland if some, say, North American state were to invade them.
Oh, well, that's cheating. You're tagging in. You're not allowed to do that.
Hey, the U.S. tagged in both world wars.
Oh, well, yeah, I guess. You're welcome, France.
Now they might start the third one. Give Germany a break on this one.
Wait. France might start the third one?
No,
I don't think so.
The United States might.
Dr. Tapioca Weasel says, okay, but everything is softer than physics. That's why I'm a physicist. Congenial priapism. Hashtag only physics. Hashtag physics is hard.
Dude, do you know what priapism is?
No.
You ever hear those commercials where they say that if a particular condition persists for more than 4 hours, you should see a doctor? Yeah, that's a priapism or priapism. You know what the treatment is?
Watching flat Earth videos.
No, although that might work. The typical treatment is actually lancing with a blade.
Oh,
and draining
blood.
Yep.
No.
Yep.
No, I'm just gonna pull up YouTube. I'm gonna look for some old Bob Nodell. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, it can also just happen from a blow to the head, which rough times. So yeah. So something flatties also suffer from. Maybe that's why they're all so angry. They had to go get Lance because of their priapism. They're so all right. This stuff is hitting me a little. I haven't had a drop. This is just regular old tune shine. Nobody's. I've been having this even though nobody's been talking about the Asian brown snake, which is the new drink term for this stream. Oh, nice. Lisa says Vizzini. And you, friendless, brainless, helpless, hopeless, do you want me to send you back to where you were, unemployed and in Greenland? Oh, one of the best movies. I love that movie. Anyone who doesn't like that movie is objectively wrong. Yep. We have it on DVD in the camper. We watch it almost every time we go anywhere. Perfect. So here's what we do. We can't. Walmarts suck now. You can't camp at Walmarts. You used to be able to. We'd go everywhere Walmart. You just pull in, you're good. Now we got to go somewhere else. So on this last trip we went to Florida, we stopped at Cracker Barrel a couple of times and we camped in the parking lot at Lowe's hardware store. Lowe's lets you do that, huh? They let us do it. We actually pulled into a Walmart. Guy comes up in a tow truck. He's like, you can't park here. Sorry, they pay me to tell people they can't park here. But if you want, you can head over to Lowe's. I'm like, all right. So we go over to Lowe's, pull the generator out, fire it up, watch a movie. Nice. I don't know what we watched that night.
and leave it running all night because it was cold. And when we had the electric blankets going, the best though was the last night of our trip. We were at Cracker Barrel in outside of Chicago, and it was cold. My water bottle actually had slush in it in the morning. It was up against the wall of the canvas, so that we have the sides fold out. But we had the generator running all night long, and had the electric blanket and the heater going, and I was toasty.
Nice. So here's one thing. So the Vicini character is played by Wallace Shawn, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
he also played a recurring character in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Grand Nagus Zek. And they wanted someone with a funny voice. But apparently Wallace Shawn said to the producers, like, I don't know if my voice is funny. It's like, Wallace, you'll be fine. Trust us. Your voice is perfect for this. It's like, my voice is too normal for this. Like, is it, Wallace? Is it really?
A little bit of self-awareness problem there, huh?
Yeah. Hey, that's all right, though, because Grand Nagus Zek is a great character.
Dr. Tapioca Weasel says they call me Sir Lancelot.
Ouch.
Seriously, that I would not want that.
No.
Knowing that, if it ever happens, like, and they're like, if it was for more than 4 hours, call a doctor. I'm like, you know what? I don't know what I'm gonna do, but whatever I do, I don't want Sir Lancelot to show up.
I'll say this: there is an alternate treatment if you opt not to have it lanced and then it persists too long.
Okay, why are you an expert on this? I don't know.
Why am I an expert on any of this? It's called debridement, which is when they remove dead tissue, which would be basically the whole thing.
Oh, the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. So you can get a lance and blood drained, or you can get the snip.
Why would you? Why
Because
would
it would have died.
Oh, if it goes too long.
Yeah, because the blood is going in but not coming out, which means it's going to run out of oxygen after it fills up. And now the tissue is going to die. So, I mean, yeah, that's your other option, is just have necrotic organs that have to be removed entirely.
And
so
then
you might want to go for the lance.
And it could be a little bit like Mikey Smith's left toe.
I'm subscribed to Mikey Smith's left toe, by the way. I don't know why, but I am. I still can't believe that he went on his channel with a Dremel to display his own actual debridement of dermal tissue. I'm like, oh my God, Mikey, isn't healthcare free up there?
It is.
Why doesn't he go to the doctor?
He does, but he doesn't do what the doctor says.
Oh my God. He's gonna lose that foot. You know that, right? That foot's
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a poll up, by the way.
And look here, Mikey. I know sometimes you watch Toon's channel, and I know you don't know who I am, right? But a childhood friend of mine died as a result of diabetes complications like 4 years ago. The guy wasn't even 40. Take this seriously, man. Go do what the doctor tells you. Sure, maybe he's a big pharma shill. I don't care, man. Go do what he tells you. Take whatever insulin you need to take. Test your blood. Keep on top of your blood sugar, man. Get whatever compression socks or whatever else you need if you're listening to this, man. Because, look, you're a flat earther and you're a joke and you're not a very great person, but I don't want you to die for no good reason. I don't dislike flat earthers that much. I want you to survive, Mikey.
At least not that flat earther.
Yeah, look, I can't speak for all flat earthers. There's some much worse flat earthers out there than Mikey Smith. But Mikey, just do what the doctor tells you. There's got to be good doctors over in Regina. I don't know.
All right. Well, for anybody who's wondering, it's not Mikey Smith's channel. It's Mikey Smith's left toe channel.
It's true.
And it's very much different than Mikey Smith's channel, and it's linked right now there if you are interested. The 82% of you that are not yet subscribed can become subscribed. You can fix the problem right now.
Just maybe go to that after you're not eating, and maybe don't plan on eating anytime soon. I'll just say that. It's hard to look at.
Well, yeah, I'm not looking at it right now, by the way, because my hand's in the way.
It's rough, but it really is a serious medical condition. And Mikey, you need to get that looked at, and you need to follow the doctor's orders. Please.
Jack Better says too much science tonight. F you both. You know what? I just need to finish this, and then the science will be done.
And there has been a lot of science. And here's one of the nice things about young Earth creationism that I like. One of the reasons I like collaborating with other people is because I only know a sliver of what young Earth creationists talk about, right? And when I talk about the stuff I know about, I'm like, this is ridiculously bad. Like, this is absurdly dumb. Like, why would anyone take this seriously? But it's easy for me to forget that they're just as bad at all the other things that I don't know as much about, right? Like, I'm not great at genetics, but I know more than one geneticist who also looks at young Earth creationist stuff, and they can't believe it either. Although, I'll bet I can tell you a young Earth creationism story from Kent Hovind that, even with your knowledge of genetics, will blow your mind.
Okay.
Tune. All right. So Kent Hovind has his own idea as to how DNA comes together in sexual reproduction in organisms like humans and most organisms that do sexual reproduction, right? So you probably know about, you get half your chromosomes from dad and half from mom, and the ones from dad go into the ovum and they combine into the nucleus, and now you have a full set of, 46 chromosomes. Unless there's a problem, in which case maybe you don't. Kent Hovind thinks that what actually happens is, after the DNA gets into the same nucleus, the double helix on each side unwinds, and then one side from dad combines with the other side of the double helix from mom.
Oh.
Rewinds back into a chromosome, while the other side from dad and the other side from mom go wind back together into yet another chromosome. And he also thinks,
but now you have two new unique chromosomes. Mm-hmm. Okay, keep
that
going.
Don't actually fit together, because you can't actually get those chromosomes to line up perfectly, because they would have to be completely complementary strands, which they never will be, because you and your dad and your mom don't have exactly the same DNA.
Yeah.
So this can't work anyway. But he also thinks that, you know what a base pair is, right?
Yes.
So he thinks each base pair actually is a gene, but it also contains one gene from mom and one from dad. And so he thinks that the human genome apparently has like 4 billion genes in it. It doesn't. It's more like 20,000, in case you're wondering. He also thinks that every single base pair is completely unique from other base pairs, even though they're actually identical to a quarter of all your base pairs, because they're just one chemical. Or, well, technically 2 chemicals that are complementary, but like there's only 4 options for that. And everyone with the same option is identical. He thinks they're all different. And yep.
Wow.
It's pretty bad. It's like if you went to high school.
He's LARPing as an expert in this field, which of course is a lot of people.
He calls himself an expert on dinosaurs and the Bible. And I debated him once on the topic of, are birds dinosaurs? Spoiler alert, yes. He didn't know what a dinosaur is. So as I was going, I was realizing
now that you've said that, I probably don't either.
But here's the difference between you and Kent Hovind. You don't call yourself Dr. Toon, an expert on dinosaurs and the Bible.
That you have a good point there.
That's the thing, right? Like, I don't want to go after someone who isn't making ridiculous claims about themselves.
Bottom left on that.
Yeah, exactly.
He's top
that's
left.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. Bottom left is fine. Most people are bottom left for most things. That's a perfectly fine place to be.
Yeah.
Top left. So basically, as I was going through the debate, I was like, this guy doesn't seem to know what makes a dinosaur, like how you could tell that an organism is dinosaur. So I just asked him, I was like, hey, Kent, if you found a skeleton in the ground, right, how would you personally decide whether or not it's a dinosaur? And his response was, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, well, I don't know. I never thought about that. I guess I would have to check. It's like, dude, you've been calling yourself Dr. Dino since the 80s. And you never bothered to check on what a dinosaur is ever. You just never thought that maybe that would be a good thing to do.
Wow.
Yeah. And I came with this whole presentation about like, this is the anatomical definition of dinosaurs based on ankle bones and hip bones and jaw bones. And here's what you have to have. And there's things like the fourth trochanter of the femur and acetabular crests and all this stuff. And he's like, oh, Darwin was a dick, though. Okay. Maybe he was. Maybe Darwin was the worst guy ever. That doesn't change anything. That's another thing that creationists will do. I don't think it happens in this video, but they love to complain about Darwin being a terrible person. And it's just like, first, most of what they say are lies. But even if they weren't, so what?
Yeah, it doesn't change the science. This flatties do the same thing. They particularly like to target Einstein.
Yeah, Einstein was horrible. Oh,
yeah.
Okay, and first of all, he wasn't. But what if he were?
He married his cousin. Therefore, relativity's wrong. No.
Darwin also married his cousin.
It's legal to marry your cousin in Tennessee. Therefore, what? Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing at all.
Also, if your family doesn't have a long history of interbreeding, a single first cousin marriage is not likely to cause very many problems. That doesn't mean you should do it, because it can cause problems. It still will be more likely, and it is illegal in many places. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if it's a first cousin marriage in a family that does not have a history of inbreeding,
is it a problem if your mom is also your sister?
Yes, that's going to be a bigger problem than just first cousins. Yeah. Yeah. That's not great. It's possible you'll come out fine. It's much less likely, though. You shouldn't do that. Hey, Elon Musk has he's got a son nephew, or not a son nephew. Sorry, he's got a nephew brother.
What's that mean?
His father impregnated his stepdaughter. Errol Musk has a baby with Errol Musk's stepdaughter, Elon Musk's stepsister.
Oh, stepdaughter.
Yeah.
Okay.
But still,
so not blood. It's creepy.
Yeah, but also
okay.
he raised this girl from like the age of like 7 or something, and then now they have a baby together, and that's gross.
There are other instances of that. There's some American actor that married his stepdaughter.
Don't like it.
Somebody's gonna. I'm. Why am I forgetting?
Yeah, someone in the chat. Let us
I know why I'm forgetting his name.
Is it all the Toonshine? The overproof Toonshine?
It's actually not much, and it's not strong. But I'm a cheap date. So Woody Allen. There we go.
Ugh, gross. Yeah, that's not okay, everybody. I don't care if it's legal. Things being legal and things being okay aren't the same category. They don't fully overlap. They go like this, right? There's a lot of overlap, but there's some things that are illegal and I think are fine anyway. And there are some things that are legal aren't okay.
Yeah. Amber Heard still smoochies?
Now a bunch of people have said Woody Allen. Anytime you ask chat, you're going to get the right answer at least 4 or 5 times.
I know. And you also, yeah, when the thing where if something can go wrong, will go wrong, right?
Murphy's Law.
Yeah. You jumped in there too soon. I was gonna. Oh. It's all right. Never mind.
I'm sorry. I ruined the joke.
I was going somewhere else.
I'm sorry. I suck at this.
No, what you do is you say something wrong on purpose.
Oh yes, like on like an answer forum.
Yeah, and then you'll get the right answer.
Yes,
yeah, that's called Murphy's razor.
Yeah, because everyone hates it when no one cares to answer questions, but everyone loves to correct people.
Yes.
I mean, to be fair, I feel like that's my entire channel is just an example of Murphy's Razor for years. Yeah, it's what can I say?
And it's
by the way,
it's not Murphy's Razor. That was intentionally spoken on purpose wrong, just to see if we get some people in the chat to correct me. I have no idea what it is, if it does even have a name.
Dr. Tabio Weasel says Dapper is bad at being wrong, though.
Dave McKeegan says, good morning, Mr. Top Left. This is bribery money.
Oh, £2. That's pretty good. That's more than I made on bribery money for the my Cambrian Bunny Awards that I have each year.
Your Cambrian Bunny Awards.
Mm-hmm. It's for Young Earth Creationists. We have a few categories. We have worst behaved. We have worst argument.
Is worst behave always Darth Dawkins?
No, it's actually more likely to be Kent Hovind. Although this past year it was actually why am I blanking on his name? Speaker of the House. That guy. I can't remember his name for some reason. It must be the Toonshine.
Neither can I.
But yeah, it's also been Kent Hovind more than once, if I remember correctly. Because he's got a body count, unlike Darth Dawkins, near as I can tell. It's not a high body count, but it's a body count.
It's got a body count, as if he, like, right, I'm not excusing it, but as if he's like, ha ha ha, let's go. I'm gonna.
Okay,
wait, hold on. This one, you got to have one vertical and one horizontal.
I happen to have a pretty reliable source that says that the Conaquew County sheriffs do not go to Dinosaur Adventureland because it's too heavily armed for them to safely approach the property. Because they've had reason to go there. And this is according to ex-Mrs. Hovind number 3, Cindy Lincoln, whom I trust on this matter because everything else she's told me about that has been either corroborated by other people or there's been like actual documented evidence that's corroborated what she said in like courtrooms. So according to Cindy Lincoln, Mrs. Hovind 3, the Conaquew County Sheriff's Department is scared to go to Dinosaur Adventureland because it is heavily armed, and they are worried that the residents there will in fact shoot at the sheriff's office.
Does it have like Mad Max like walls around it, and then people up on the turrets on the top there?
It doesn't have turrets. It does have a fence with a gate. It has earthworks that could be defensible, I suppose. So like it probably wouldn't be, it's not built like a fortress, but on the other hand, everyone there knows where to get a significant number of firearms, and I wouldn't want to storm it as a hostile force. Let's just say that.
No.
So, and also it's a cult compound. One of the ways that he gets people to live there is he will seek out people who are homeless or who are ex-cons.
Wait. Live there. This is an amusement park.
With permanent residents.
What?
I'm not kidding.
I know nothing of this place.
Dinosaur Adventureland, the current incarnation of Dinosaur Adventureland.
I've been to the old one that's derelict.
The old one wasn't like this. The old one was not like this.
Yeah.
The old one just had employees that had normal like lives. They went home to their families and everything. The current Dinosaur Adventureland, all volunteer labor. None of the labor there is paid except for room and board.
Oh, it's like Scientology.
Yeah. And the way he tends to get residents is he will find people who are out of their luck. He'll go to like truck stops and look for people who are begging, or he'll find people who are just out of prison and having trouble getting their
It's a good thing he didn't
back under them.
He didn't happen on the truck stop McFlatty was trapped in. Or did he?
I mean, you know what? Maybe that's where McFlatty is. Maybe he's just been suckered into Dinosaur Adventureland.
That would be just fine.
But the way he keeps people there is that basically most of them would be homeless, because anyone who comes there with significant property, he heavily encourages to donate to the ministry because
he wants it to be a commune.
Right. This is your new forever home. You're going to live here for the rest of your life. So what do you need that real estate for?
I see.
Why don't you sell it and give it to the ministry? But that now means that if you don't toe his line, and he kicks you out of his property, which you never signed any kind of lease, you don't have a rental agreement.
Yeah.
You're just squatting there.
You can get booted any day. Yeah.
That means you're now homeless and you don't have the resources you used to. That's it. What are you going to do? And numerous people have had that happen to them, have been kicked out with essentially nothing.
Yeah.
Also, in addition to his body count, I want to say this in a way that isn't going to get the channel in trouble. There was a man who has a conviction for playing strip poker with individuals too young to play such a game. And he allowed that man to stay on an off-site house owned by Kent, where the only furniture was a mattress, and he stayed there with a non-family member child whom he brought to the park. And according to that child, exactly what you think would happen happened.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, that has not resulted in a conviction. So all we have is the word of the child. So, do with that what you will. But it is confirmed by Kent that this man has the conviction that we know he has, which is also public record, so it doesn't matter if Kent confirms it. But it was also confirmed by him that he stayed in that house, that the only furniture was that mattress, and that all happened under his watch, and that the secretary there tried to set up different arrangements where they were going to be separately housed because they have cabins there. And Kent overruled that and said they were going to sleep together in that empty house with a provided single mattress, which says to me that I think Kent knew what was going on and he was facilitating it, but I cannot prove that, and it is not a statement of fact. That is my personal opinion based on what I know. So you can see why Kent might win worst behaved creationists.
Yeah, that would do.
Yeah.
Jack Fetter says, love this guy, new fan, but how can he be so damn smart but not be able to adjust the chroma key? So sorry, personal peeve.
It's too red.
Serenity now.
You know what? You're right about the chroma key. And the answer is because normally I have a better lighting setup, but I was scrambling because I was not paying attention to the clock. So that's the real answer.
That works. All right. We got Steve from Wormhaven says 53 Shades of Dapper.
Nice.
And Dan demands says Mikey's toe for U.S. president. I'm in.
You know what? Sure, I'll vote for Mikey's toe. You know what? Yeah.
Okay.
I've lived through some terrible presidents. I'm willing to take a change. We'll see what happens with a necrotic toe.
Let's wrap up the poll, which is unfortunate for Mikey's left toe. Because 83% are not subscribed. I'm sure people, once they've been given the link to it, will remedy that immediately.
Please.
So there you go.
Look, Mikey Smith's left toe is literally dying, and your support could make the difference.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine how amazing it would be if Mikey Smith's Left Toe YouTube channel reached 1 million subscribers? He would definitely be able to save himself and not get chopped off.
I think that's actually a possibility.
Yep.
And honestly, I would encourage Mikey Smith's Left Toe to donate that money to maybe private medical treatment, because I know that is an option in Canada. You can pay to get faster, sometimes better treatment in Canada.
There you go. Well, you'll notice something here.
All done.
All done. I've polished.
Time to go pass out.
It is, in fact. That was not much, and it is not strong. And
we got to get tuned to play the drinking game sometime.
The problem is, I'm probably like 0.02. Which means that I could legally drive, but I'm not there, but I wouldn't want to drive.
Yeah, one of my rules is if I take a drink that night, that's
no driving. Yeah.
No driving until the next morning.
Yep.
Yep. And also, if I take a drink during a day, I don't take ibuprofen. And if I take ibuprofen, I don't drink during that day because they're both really rough on your liver. And if you do them together, that's a recipe for disaster. I know people who used to drink and then take ibuprofen to get over a hangover, and it destroyed their liver.
Oh, I don't take ibuprofen at all.
Well, then you don't have to worry about that.
Because I've had hives.
Oh.
And if you look up what can trigger hives, ibuprofen and naproxen sodium can.
I'm allergic to mealworms.
So I know how tempting it might be. You're like, oh, there's some mealworms. Oh, let me just. No mealworms.
Yeah, I used to have some lizards, and I would feed them mealworms. And if I picked them up with my hands, and I didn't wash thoroughly, and I did anything like rub my nose or anything, or maybe did one of these, it was all over.
Oh, you'd get wits at eyes.
Yeah, basically. So what I started doing was putting on gloves, using tweezers, and then washing afterwards, so that I didn't have to worry about any of that.
Ah.
Yeah, and that worked. So.
Nice.
Yeah, I did not actually try to eat the mealworms, although they're not like poisonous or anything. If you eat a mealworm, as long as you're not allergic, you'll be fine.
It's so tempting.
Cover them in chocolate, or maybe deep fry them. There you go.
We do. You don't need to know this, people, but you're about to. We do a fondue party often around Christmas time, and not the chocolate fondue, not cheese fondue, the hot oil fondue. And we got chicken and steak and pizza pockets, my favorite, cheese sticks, and whatever this size frozen things we can find at Sam's Club. But then inevitably it's like, oh, hey, let's put a cheese puff in there, see what happens. And let's put a carrot in there and we'll see what happens. And why did we have worms in the house? I don't know. But the question was asked, what happens if we do a worm? And we found out.
You cook the worm. All right. Here's a crazy cooking story. So I decided one day to cook some carrots and bits of beef by putting them in a Pyrex pan, filling that with 190 proof liquor, and setting that on fire.
What?
Yep. It burned really well. So, and the thing is, like, as it goes, it cooks the meat to different levels of doneness. So, you get to start with like some rare meat and go through and see the meat at different levels. But then one of my friends, who may have had a fair bit to drink that day, decided that she was going to try and eat a piece of meat without blowing it out first.
Oh.
And so she just ended up with a big old blister on her lip.
That's not recommended.
Don't do that. Don't do that. And also, don't pour additional liquor in there if you think the fire has gone out. Just stir it around. There's probably a little bit of fire left. Now start it back up.
Yeah.
Don't pour in additional liquor. That's a bad idea.
190 proof. Was that Everclear?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then another friend of mine decided to take what he called a meat shot by taking some of the leftover juice after the fire had gone out and just downing it. Apparently, it was still very strong and very meaty, and I did not participate in that activity.
A meat shot. Oh.
Yep, that's what he called it. It was just the name. I was like,
Oh, that's nasty.
And then just watching him take a shot glass to this collected carrot and beef Everclear juice.
So, what is? Don't answer. We'll let the chat answer. What is the highest you can distill? What proof is the highest you can distill alcohol to?
I found out outside the U.S. they don't tend to use proof; they just use ABV.
The percentage?
Yeah, alcohol by volume percentage, which is just half of proof.
Answer in your preferred units. I don't know if there is a sheep units for alcohol purity.
There must be.
Yeah.
The Scots like to drink too. They've got to have a number.
Kiwi Bush has an answer, but it's not right. Lisa has an answer, but it's not right. Oh man, nope.
96 ABV.
Now there people are all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I do know that a friend of mine over distilled some pear cider and it was pretty strong.
Yeah.
He was like, it's not fizzy enough. I'll drop some extra sugar in. It's like, okay, that made it fizzier, but it also supercharged the alcohol content. You know that, right? He's like,
All right.
Greater than 1%. That's true. Christian Hoge he's right. It is greater than 1%.
So the number that I have in my head that may not be correct now because people are, I don't know, I'm questioning my own idea here. The number in my head is not 192 proof, but 92%, which would be 194 proof. So I could be wrong on that. Now, people, go look it up.
Wouldn't 92 be 184?
I have no idea.
We'll ask Terrence. He'll know. He'll tell us.
I'm not doing the arithmetic in my head right now.
That's right. Every once in a while, I like add 2 one-digit numbers. I'm like, okay, I gotta pull out my calculator app. But then other times, I'm like, okay, which trigonometric operator do I need to figure out the vector in 5-dimensional space that I need for this effect? And then I'm just like, yeah, this one probably. And like, oh yeah, that worked. I have a very weird relationship with math. Basic arithmetic, and I'm like, not super confident. And dimensional vectors, that's Tuesday.
That's Tuesday.
Well, I mean, usually it's more like Wednesday, but yeah.
All right. And this isn't a quick one to Google. The problem is, all right, I'm going to ask AI.
Uh-oh. You know, those things lie.
They do.
Make stuff up.
Though,
I actually tried to Google something the other day and it was like, oh, just use this function in your software. And I'm like, yeah, that's a function you made up. That software doesn't have that function.
All right. The one nice thing about AI is often you don't need to give it a great context.
It'll make up an answer that sounds right, even with little context. So that's nice.
I just asked, what's the highest proof you can distill? I did not say ethanol. Mm-hmm. Right? But it knew from context what I meant.
What was the answer it gave you?
I'm looking.
Oh, okay.
191.2.
191.2.
So there we go.
Sounds plausible.
Lisa said 192, which is very close. If you're going to round to 3 digits is 191. But why did I had 92%,
which is 184.
Yeah. So you think.
Sure, I haven't checked with Terrence Howard. He is the new king of math.
I don't know why. So I think I'll assume that this is correct, that it is 191.2 or about 192. We're rounding up for Lisa.
So what we're saying is you could distill Everclear, at least close to it.
Yeah, what's Everclear? 190, right?
Yeah, well, it comes in a few different ones, but the one everyone knows about is 190.
Yeah, you can still, because to get past that, it's there's a barrier, right? The azeotrope.
Yeah, basically, at a certain concentration, it sucks water out of the air and just goes down in proof.
Well, no, I think that what happens at that ratio is that they both boil at the same temperature.
Oh yeah, because I'm thinking of just like having it sitting around, but you're talking about distilling. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
So then, all right. So you add a third component, or
That's how you know I'm not a flerf. I just admitted that I was wrong when presented with evidence.
Vacuum distillation, you can do it, or molecular sieve, past the 95.6% through a desiccant. So there you go.
We have a super chat.
I do. Oh, now Pinion for 129 secs. This Dapper. Eating breakfast with my daughter, automatic teller machine. She just saw your face and asked who was. She couldn't believe it was the smart dinosaur. She says hello. Not sure you remember us though.
I do remember you, Now Opinion, and hello. I did a little interview with Now Opinion a while back now, and his daughter was there, and it was a lot of fun, and he has a very adorable daughter. Or at least she was adorable a few years ago. I hope you haven't changed that.
Yeah, stop. You don't stop being adorable.
Mm-hmm. It's a good skill. So yeah, I definitely remember you guys. It was actually a really fun interview. Unfortunately, the audio didn't work out great, so that's unfortunate. But.
So I'm sorry, I misspoke. So if I'm going to read it correctly here, right? Dapper eating breakfast with my daughter. Asynchronous transfer mode.
That makes more sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Does that have anything to do with like centripetal divergence or anything?
No, nope. That has to do. It's a networking thing, computer networking thing. So
I actually, I was doing a Star Trek show basically with Craig, and every once in a while I throw in some like wits at word salad for tech jargon. Yeah. We're like, oh no, the spatial anomaly has gone into its inertial state. It might charge back up. I've also decided that the new slang for being high is being etherically displaced. So anyone who wants to use that.
Oh.
if you decide to, maybe take a little toke or eat a little edible, you're now etherically displaced.
I can tell you by watching Witzit's recent videos, he has been etherically displaced. So it seems. So
hey, you know what? I'm not going to judge if you want to get etherically displaced.
I think
also don't lie. That's the thing.
I think the etheric displacement though may have been from some other compound than the ones that are legal. I don't know. I'm not into that.
Look, I'm not
community.
Here to judge your recreational activities that don't harm other people or yourself.
They may or may not have harmed certain other people. Humbly, of course.
I will say this, though. Witsit, why are you lying about this? It's not like it's a mystery, right? Like, people saw you vape. Just own up to it.
Well, he owned up to the vaping after the fact. You may have missed that he had a certain altercation with his wife on the 24th of December.
I saw the table slam video.
Yeah.
And I don't know the full context there or all the stuff.
None of us do. It was.
Yeah, I guess she does.
It was posted by allegedly by her account on Tuesday to the Earth Awakening's Discord server.
You were going to say the etherically displaced Discord server, weren't you?
I was.
I can tell.
That is exactly what I was going to say.
Hey, maybe that's what they're all doing in there. They're getting etherically displaced.
Anyway, other people have analyzed it and have thought that the part of the topic of the conversation was etheric displacement, but not the ones that are legal in Florida. Right. Well, no, Florida, I don't think it isn't. The ones that are legal in many states, other etheric displacement techniques.
So you're saying he wasn't cheating on his wife with Mary Jane, but perhaps with someone else?
Well, I think Mary Jane's a given.
Right.
I think that's just a yes, definitely. But it was the idea that some people have offered is that it was some other than Mary Jane.
So there was like a whole group scene going together, and Mary Jane was there, but so was someone else.
Yes. I'm gonna put it that way.
Okay.
I love reading the comments on his most recent videos because half of the comments are, dude,
I've seen those, yeah.
Dude, you're on something.
Oh.
He's like, no, sure.
There's someone I've talked about a little bit who always seems like he's etherically displaced. Shall we say? It's Ammon Hillman. You know who this guy is?
No.
okay. Well, first, I want to point something out. If you take a look at a text and you make up stuff that isn't in the text, that doesn't say anything about the text. It says something about you.
Yeah.
Evan Hillman has decided that the Old Testament was actually written in Greek. It wasn't. He's also decided that the actual real meaning of the Gospels, not even like the secret hidden meaning, just the regular old meaning, if you actually read it in real Greek that he actually knows, he knows the secret Greek that everyone else doesn't know.
Ooh, cool.
Jesus was actually a human trafficking sex addict who was also a druggie.
What?
And he, you know that like when people are on certain drugs, they get that kind of sway and a little bit of a jaw wag. They can't really keep their jaws. Well, he always looks like he's on multiple drugs, and he talks like he's on multiple drugs. And I feel like maybe his interpretation of the Gospels are more projection than scholarship. Can't prove it. Don't know for certain. But like I said, when you make things up about a text, it says more about the text than it says about you.
It says more about you than the text.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. That's,
Yeah.
Again, too much toonshine.
Too much, yeah. How etherically displaced is Mikey Smith's left toe? All right.
Oof.
How many, we got to see how many subscribers Mikey Smith's left.
Oh, yeah. We got to get it into at least like the mid hundreds, right? Like 400 or 500. How many people are watching right now?
You know what would be the best? It's a bit hard to happen.
So is the skin on Mikey's toe.
The best thing would be if that channel had more subscribers than Mikey Smith.
Oh, how many does he have?
All right, Mikey Smith's left toe has 76.
Okay.
Mikey Smith has 2,600. See, that's
It's not easy, but that's possible.
it's possible.
Wait, how long has he been doing this?
Has Mikey been doing? I don't know. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh, I accidentally looked at the video.
Oh no. Just the thumbnail.
No, the video's worse because it's all cracky
Oh, yeah,
and
moving and
all right. His oldest video is 6 years ago. Oh my gosh, Mikey.
Oh, Mikey.
April 23 of 2018.
Hey, again, Mikey, if you decide to watch this, which you might, I don't know. I'm going to give you a pro tip. Yelling at your audience about how you're the only one they can trust is not a great way to get your audience to grow, because new people will come in and just feel berated, and then they'll just leave. It's like Arwen, right? When he was yelling at people to give him money. That doesn't actually get people to give you money. They have to want to give you money and support because you're providing what they want. Berating people is what, okay, I can't say no one wants to be berated, right? Because there's some people out there.
There
who are into
are,
that.
yeah, that's some people.
But that's not the target audience you're going for. So, maybe that might work on OnlyFans, though. Maybe Mikey can get on an OnlyFans where he just berates people and people can sign up for that.
Could be.
I mean, there's no rule that says it has to be like spicy content on OnlyFans. You can do whatever you want there.
That's a good point. Mikey Smith's new revenue stream is now figured out, and he can pay for the help that his toe needs.
His toe transplants, I guess.
Grafting.
Toe grafting.
It's from a liger.
Maybe next winter, some poor chap is going to spin out and crash and die on the frozen, icy roads of Regina, and Mikey will be on the toe list, and he'll get a brand new toe.
So, all right, there's an old movie from the 80s or 70s, maybe, a sci-fi movie. I always forget the name, where the bad guy grafts his victim's body parts onto his own body.
I don't think I've seen that.
And he puts he gets an alien that has 3 fingers, and of course it's just a glove, right?
Right.
and he grafts the alien's hand onto his own hand. So now he has the alien's hand as his trophy, and the other aliens can control that hand telepathically. So they get together. They get together and choke him.
So they control the whole arm then, right? I guess.
I don't know. It was, you know.
I do feel like a similar plot point happened in Elden Ring.
I don't know that.
There's a lot of. You haven't played Elden Ring?
Played? Is this a?
It's a video game. Yeah, it's a video game.
I play Clash Royale and Crush Flerfs. That's it. That's all the games that I play.
My favorite little bit about Elden Ring is that so Elon Musk plays Elden Ring, and he put out publicly the build that he uses for his character. And it's so bad that it's now a challenge run category for people who want to make the game especially hard for themselves. One of the ways they do it is you have to use Elon Musk's Elden Ring build because it's absolute garbage. And explaining it would be hard to do, but I can do this, right? Part of it seems like he's set up for like a really heavy armor. I can take hits. Except he also has items that increase the amount of damage he's taken, which completely negates the concept of putting on a lot of armor to reduce the damage. If you then put on an item that says, I take 15% more damage.
Does it do that? Is there a trade-off for that though?
He gets a few extra levels and a few different attributes, but he could just do that anyway. And also, by the time you get to the point where you can wear such heavy armor, you don't need those extra levels. They're superfluous. Just don't take the damage.
Okay. Battle Beyond the Stars. You see,
I have not seen that one.
yeah, that's it. 1980. I forget it. I forget the title every time. And then somebody stating the obvious states the obvious. You know what? That wasn't really very obvious, but I do appreciate that you're able to get that. Battle Beyond the Stars.
Have you seen Disney's The Black Hole from a similar time period? I don't know exactly which year.
No.
Oh, that
does not ring a bell.
That one flopped, but it was a fun one. That was back when Disney had that other film label that they used to put out like things that didn't seem like Disney. Not adult, but like, you know, like serious type movies. I don't remember what the other label was called, but it was like it's Disney, but the target audience doesn't want to watch a Disney movie. And now they just own like the Avengers or something. I don't know.
They own a lot now.
They own like everything. It's kind of annoying, honestly.
Like Lucas was going insane with Star Trek. Or Star Wars. Mm-hmm. I know the difference.
I forgive you.
And people are like, stop it. Stop. Can somebody stop George Lucas? And Disney's like, well, we come to help. All right, Lucas. Put down the etherically displaced. We're just going to take it over and we're going to make it stop sucking. But then they made it suck. Yeah, they made it suck worse.
I still haven't seen episode 9. I don't plan to.
1, 2, and 3 are all you need to never see. Those are the ones you never need to see.
They're not good movies. And then some people are like, well, now that the sequel trilogy is out, you're going to reassess how you feel about the prequel trilogy? Like, no, they're still not good movies. They're not as bad as the sequel trilogy, but they're not good. Although, to be fair, I didn't absolutely hate 7. I just was like, it's a thing that exists.
Just a second. I'm looking at the listing, the cast for the movie Battle Beyond the Stars. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, my brain is not working right today.
Is there a flat earther in there?
No.
Okay.
James Cameron.
Really?
Was the art director. Wait, a young Bill Paxton worked on the sets as a carpenter and painter in between jobs at the recommendation of a good friend, art director, and future collaborator. Yeah, he was the art director of Battle Beyond the Stars. That's what IMDb says.
That's weird. That is weird.
I mean, there's art. There's some good art there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not disputing that. It's just weird that Cameron was just the art director
for a pretty bad 80s cheesy movie. It's like name the first or second movie by the guy that did Lord of the Rings.
Peter Jackson?
Yeah.
I mean, I have no idea.
First or second movie. All right, we're gonna have to go to the live chat here. The audience, what is the name of the first or second? They'll get it right away. First or second movie.
It wasn't the Blade movie.
Nope.
Okay.
It was not. There we go. Conspiracy Music Studios gets it. The first one is Bad Taste. The second one, I'm waiting for people to say it.
I have no idea.
Dead Alive.
Dead Alive? I don't think I've seen either of those.
There's a different name for that, I think, in England. Dead Alive was one of the first I've seen of
of Peter Jackson.
Of the early, I saw that one before I saw Bad Taste. I like it better.
Okay.
Brain Dead is the name of the alternate name for it, I think is correct. Yeah.
I guess it's a zombie movie then.
It is, yeah. I mean, the guy's mom gets bitten by a Sumerian rat monkey. I mean, who hasn't had that happen to him?
Man,
she turns into a zombie. Yeah. The best scene, of course, is no spoilers. So I won't tell you.
Okay.
No, I'm gonna tell you. There's a statute of limitation on spoilers, right?
Yeah, I think it's like 20 years or something. I don't know.
It's probably less than that. Anyway, there's the whole house is full of zombies because that's what happens. And he knew it. The main character, he's like, hey, I need to get rid of these zombies. So he goes out to the shed. He gets the lawnmower. He cuts off he removes the handle. He slings it over him with like a strap, so he can hold it up in front of himself. And then he has it so that he can wield his shield / lawnmower blade. And he goes into the house, and it just shows him like hacking and slashing across all of them, as he's walking across the entryway of the house, and it keeps cutting to his feet, and he's walking in like zombie blood this deep and zombie body parts that are just all over the place. It's just so bad.
All right.
It's so bad it's good.
I don't think my mom's ever been bitten by a Sumerian monkey rat.
Rat monkey. I'm sorry. Yes.
I don't know how I could have made that mistake. But
yeah, you got to get the adjective and noun correct.
She did once forget to drink any water in the middle of the summer in Phoenix. That could have turned her into a zombie.
That could have. You maybe just snuck by.
Yeah, we're hanging out, and like it's like, hey, you want some more water? And she's like, no, I'm fine. I've still got this. And I'm like, what? You haven't gone through this water bottle in the last like hour? It's Phoenix. It's like 110 Fahrenheit. What are you doing? Like, oh, I'm fine. Like 30 seconds later, I feel dizzy. Yeah, you sweat out every last drop of water. Of course you feel dizzy. Hey guys, if you're ever in the desert, drink extra water. It doesn't feel as hot because your sweat is more efficient at removing the heat. But every bit of sweat is water that you're losing. Replace it. Don't die in the desert because you forgot to drink in the middle of a place with water fountains, which is what was happening. Don't do that.
All right. Well, I don't need to go and download Battle Beyond the Stars because I have already downloaded Battle Beyond the Stars. And I'll tell you, let's see, if you want to go find it yourself, you can find it on the usual spots. And the particular one that I have downloaded is yts.mx. So there you go.
I'm sure legally acquired.
Totally. That's how it was done. Anyway, you know what? I think Mikey Smith needs to sing us a song as we close out. Do you concur?
Are you sure you're not gonna get a guideline strike for exposing people to Mikey Smith?
It's not his left toe. It's just
okay.
Mikey
Smith, then yes,
singing the the awesomest of all songs SpaghettiOs. Anyway, anything that you'd like to say on the way out here, Dapper Dino?
Come by. I have another show on Saturday. I released a video today. My Tuesday shows often overlap with this channel, so I get it. If you don't want to come by for those, that's fine. But yeah, and then also on Friday, if you like tabletop RPG actual plays, we're going to be doing some Alien TTRPG over my second channel, Top Hats Off. I expect at least a few people to die, and also It's Rubik's will be there. So,
Excellent.
Yeah.
There you go.